a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, guys, we are back for another episode. This is episode number 271 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, June the 21st, 2025. My name is Jeremy Lee. Guys, tomorrow night on the channel, Fanatics Collect Weekly, all sport auction ending watch party happening here on the channel. And on Monday, we have MC Monday's showcase style. That is on Monday. And Thursday is the Fanatics Collect premiere auction ending watch party. And guys, you can now find the audio tracks from the Sports Cards Live auction shows on their very own tidy little new podcast called Sports Cards Live Auction Night. Subscribe for free. I appreciate everybody who requested these, and I apologize it took so long to get them back up, but they are now back up on Apple and Spotify. And check out the Road to the National series here on the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel. 5 episodes so far, one more that I expect to drop next week. If you are looking to add a grail to your collection, make sure you check out Fund Your Cards, the hobby's leading consolidator. They will help you finance that purchase with your own cards. Visit fundyourcards.com. You will find their proprietary client platform that cements them as the leaders in the space. Mint Inc. is the leading hobby experience in Canada. Check out their physical Vaughan location in Toronto. And if you are not in their neck of the woods, visit their website, mintinc.ca, for online shopping with worldwide shipping. They do live stream shopping, auctions, breaks, grading, and more. Mintinc.ca. Guys, check out GP Sports Cards for a wide variety of hockey breaks located right here on YouTube, streaming every Wednesday and Friday. All new products and breaks can be found on their website, gpsportscards.com. And if you are looking for a gem mint in sports statistics, Rolling Insights delivers high-quality data for businesses who trust their data feeds to power their platforms with real-time stats, box scores, and player and performance data. Fantasy players rely on SportWise for instant access to the performance data. Ditch those messy spreadsheets. Turn raw stats into a real advantage. Visit rolling-insights.com. And also check out Chronosio, the ultimate inventory manager with 90% accurate AI auto-filling. You'll love their fully integrated eBay connection that has been a trusted part of the eBay community since 2017. Millions of cards have been listed and sold using Chronosio. Once you hit 1,000, 50,000, even 250,000 cards, Chronosio is the only option. Elevate your collection and your inventory management. Get started at home.chronosio with a K.com. And if you'd like to sell your cards on eBay and you'd like the professionals to handle it for you, reach out to me directly and I can be your Slab Sharks rep and help you get your cards sold on eBay. Hit me up on Instagram or send me an email at jeremy@slabsharks.com. Guys, this show is available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow and subscribe for free. Please leave a rating or a review on your podcast platform. And thank you, as always, to our loyal viewers and listeners for your ongoing support. If you're not yet subscribed to this YouTube channel, please take a moment and do so. And as always, tonight, your comments and your questions will be in play. Let's get to it. Let's bring out Mr. Joe Perau from Santa Cruz. Buddy, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jay Lee. How are you tonight?
I mean, I'm good. I'm still fighting this cough that I had last week, but I am good. The Stanley Cup playoffs have come to a close. We have Game 7 of the NBA Championship Final Series tomorrow night. I mean, those Pacers, they did a number on the Thunder the other day. I was watching it. I was happy to see that. But Game 7, anything can happen. What's your prediction? What's your prediction for tomorrow night, Joe?
OKC's tough at home. I mean, I think the Pacers would have to play a nearly flawless game to take it on their home floor. But I'm rooting for the Pacers. So
I'm rooting for the Pacers too, for whatever reason. I just am. And Pascal, used to play for the Raptors up here in Canada, and it's going to be a fun game to watch. I don't know, for some reason I think I don't know. I feel like I'm enjoying it at least as much, maybe more than I would if it were two of the teams that are just always there. The LeBron. I know you'd love the Warriors to be there. I get it, but the Celtics, the Lakers, the Clippers, whoever else, whatever team Durant is on, sort of thing, So
no, it's definitely mixing it up a little bit to have some different teams and franchises that haven't been there. And the fan bases are great too. I mean, both Indiana and OKC fans, they're so passionate. So that's fun to see.
And now we know that the Oilers could not win the Stanley Cup. The Florida Panthers repeated. I never really thought the Oilers had. I was hoping, but I didn't think they had a chance. Florida's too good, and they really proved it. And there's a lot of talk about McDavid's legacy, what it means, and there's a lot of things that he's accomplished without winning a Stanley Cup yet. So I hope he does, but I don't know if it's going to be with that roster in that city. Time will tell. We'll see what happens with that. Oh, and big news for you. Monday night, are you still doing that thing you told me you were doing?
I believe that's happening, but I haven't heard a whole lot of news. So I guess, stay tuned.
Guys, it looks like our guy Joe Perau is going to be guest starring on Midlife Live number whatever 6 or something like that on Monday night. I
don't think it's a live one, so I think we're doing it Monday. Maybe it'll get released the next day or something. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it, but looking forward to making my cameo in Midlife Nation.
Nice. Yeah, I look forward to. I'll be doing the MC Mondays showcase show that night, but that'll go for about an hour and a half, and then I'll definitely, if I can't tune in live with you guys, I will definitely watch it afterwards. So excited to watch that for sure, guys. Check out Joe on Midlife with Greg Miller on Monday night. And then the only other thing I had kind of before we bring the hobby president, Mr. John Mangini, onto the screen with us, Joe, was just continuing to chat a bit about that term that you came up with, I think, last week. We talk about, yes, exactly. First of all, shout out yet again to Dan from Dan's Vintage for coining the term own appeal, OWN, own appeal. We talk a lot about I appeal, but there's appeal just in owning a card, especially a rare card, especially a tougher card to find, especially to use one of President Mangini's favorite terms, an oddball type of card that, it just doesn't, cards that don't turn up, that aren't really on the hobby, part of the hobby mainstream, let's say. But own appeal, I think it's a term that it's got legs in my opinion. And then there's the one that you came up with the other day. We were talking about type collecting and how it's kind of nice to, explore the history of the hobby by owning different cards from different sets. We don't have to set collect every single thing, but maybe you want to own one card from each set that you love or that you like for whatever reason. But I like pairing cards together. I like putting cards in pairs, triples, quads. And then you came up with the term for that. You called it flight collecting, based on when you go to the pub and you want to get a sample of all the beers, you order a flight of beers. So you're getting 4 or 5 different ones. So what about flight collecting? The more I think about it, Joe, I realize that is exactly the type of collector that I want to be. And it falls between strict type collecting and, say, Hall of Famer collecting, because I think there's another level. I don't think you go from type collecting to flight collecting to set collecting. I think you go type, flight, Hall of Famer, or team from that particular checklist, and then all the way to set collecting. So
right.
The more I think about it, the more that term resonates with me, and I feel like it's right. It's the way I want to be collecting as I move forward.
I love it. Well, you inspired me with your I think it was the exquisite number patches that you had, the 4 that you put together, including the MJ, Kobe, and Durant. And then I was thinking about it for myself. And, one of the things with a flight appeal might also include in similar slabs. And the only reason I'm saying that is I did a little self-inventory, and I have these old T206 cards all slabbed up in the no longer, used SCD. So these are all just 3s and 4s of, T206s that I've had for years now. And they're just basic. They're not particularly, they're commons, but fun cards to have, and kind of like in the spirit of a flight, right? Just having 4 commons that are all in the 3 to 4 range. So
yeah. And so here's another thing. 54 tops. I love 54 tops baseball. So I own an Ernie Banks, I own the Hank Aaron, and I own the Alkay line. And I love that they're all different colors. So I started looking through the checklist and I realized, well, hey, Yogi Berra is green. It's almost like building a rainbow in 54 tops. It's a type of flight collecting. You can get a different color, right?
Yeah.
We see the same thing in several older sets where the colors, they didn't use a ton of different ones, but they used different ones. And if you can pick your favorite player within each color, and you don't want to break the bank and get, every single card, because there's other sets to buy cards from still, that's a pretty fun way to do it too.
That's a great way of thinking about it too, because when you're getting a flight, you're getting a variety, right? You're getting a variety of different tastes and probably different tones. You might get the wheat, you might get the the shimmer pills or whatever it might be. So having all the colors represented, if you're doing a 54, a 58, you could have some fun with a 58 set with those backgrounds. So anyway, good stuff.
Totally. All right. Well, let's say hello to the chat, and then we're going to bring the president on the screen. James Wynn, what's up? Welcome to the show. Laura, good evening to you. Linda's First is here as well. We have the professor. We have Brett S. from Down Under. What's going on, Brett? Yankees fan, hello to you. Jacob Dahl is here. Tampa is here. Pick Six Cards is here as well. Mark Santucci, good evening. Welcome to the show. Todd McDonald, good to see you, Todd. Mid-Atlantic is here. What's happening? Willie T, looking forward to another great show. So are we. Eric Young, glad to finally catch the show from the start. Glad to have you here, Eric. Welcome to the show. Piccolina the cat is here. What's going on, Piccolina? Chad Shipper, good to see you, Chad. Mookie Chilson, Dylan and Joe going on with the big kahuna. Going to be a fun night on Monday. Peeps is in the house. 1956 Tops guy. Matthew says, own appeal is such a fun concept. I know I utilize it, no doubt. Bob Boozle wishes he could invent some new phrases. Bob, talk to the wife. I'm sure you guys can come up with something for sure. Matthew says, I'm definitely a flight collector. I feel like the entry point for most collectors is player collecting for sure. Most likely. Laura says, all collectors, seatbelts fastened and trays, tables up, please. Very good. Very good. Matthew says, that's what I call the vintage rainbow. Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me. Matthew, Robert Scott's here. Good evening, Matthew. Midlife Greg is here. We were just talking about the Monday night show on the channel, Greg. Excited to watch you with Dylan Double D and, of course, Joe Perot. All right, guys, welcome to the show. If you are on Instagram, feel free to come on over to the YouTube channel. That is where the action is at. Joe, we're going to bring the president on. John, you ready to come on, Mr. Mangini? He gives me the big head nod. Let's bring on everybody's president, John Mangini. John, welcome back, buddy. It's been a while. How are you?
Jeremy, Joe, great to be on.
It's good to have you.
I loved hearing you talk about my man Dan and the own appeal. I was just with him in New York City. We had some beers together, and I love that flight. I hadn't heard that before. I love that.
Does that resonates with you? That was
it does, because I have the long-term goal of trying to get one card from every vintage set, and when you just have one, it's lonely. I don't know, it's like all alone. Like you need to have 3 or 4, way better. I love that flight. Well,
Joe he coined the term after hearing me talk about that style of collecting, and I thought, what a perfect word for it. And it's you think about type and flight, they kind of roll off the tongue nicely together. So yeah, I think it's got legs, just like own appeal has legs as well.
That own appeal, when Dan told me about that, I said that's gonna catch on. That's got to catch on. Yeah. Because I've always done that, I guess. It's like if I had a T206 Honest Wagner and the corner was ripped off, I would still want to own it.
Exactly. The older we go back, the further we go back, I find the more that own appeal becomes relevant to more collectors, because there's just, you don't have the options. Look at here. I'm going to share the screen here quickly. Look at this card here that is maybe going to sell tonight, although the reserve isn't met yet. But this thing's a complete disaster. I mean, look at it. Look at it. But it doesn't matter. It's the own appeal, the ability to say that you own one of the 50 or 60 known copies of this card. That's a special thing. So yeah,
exactly.
Own appeal is definitely it's accurate, it's relevant, it's an astute way of looking at things. And it's just sometimes nice to put a name to these concepts like Dan did, like Joe did. So, yeah.
Cutting edge.
Cutting edge. That's right. Making history here on YouTube, right? Well, John, we invited you back onto the show. You know, you've been putting out a lot of videos lately, I've been noticing, and I like them. They're short and sweet. You get your idea out, and then I gots to go. And you're done. And you're done for the day, or maybe you're not until you're at least done for the video. But there's a bunch of concepts that you've talked about, and I thought maybe we could just, hash out a few of them here tonight and just kind of just talk about some things and get some additional thoughts from you. Before we do, Greg says that the episode on Monday, it won't be live. Okay, good. So I can watch it after my Monday show. It'll be recorded. Brett S., Mr. President, the man genius. I love it. Love it. Bob Boozle, Dan must be giggling with glee in his card room hearing all of this. Well, hey, he's got a great thing going over on
Bob Boozle's the best commenter on YouTube.
He's pretty good.
He's the most interesting, that's for sure. Right?
I want to meet his wife. How about you?
Oh, 100%. And give her an award for putting up with this guy. So let's jump into some topics here, John. The first one on my list is simply like, are we looking at our cards? Or are we always chasing the next one? I know that a card comes in the mail, or I buy it at a card show. I come home, I process it into my collection. I scan it, I add it to the spreadsheet. I leave it on my desk for at least a week, maybe a little bit more, before it goes into the box with the rest of my cards. And then the question is, how often do I look at the rest of my cards? And you brought this up on one of your videos recently, and I think it's an important and interesting collector conversation. So before we get into it further, give us your thoughts on the importance of looking at our cards. How often do you look at your? I know you say you say it every video. Every video you say, "What do I like to look at some baseball cards." So,
yeah, the truthful answer is not often enough, because I think as collectors we're always looking for the chase. It's all about the chase, and we get that card, we put it in the set, or we put it aside, and then we're moving on to the next one. And, sometimes it's important just to appreciate what we already have. I have so many great cards, and I found myself like focusing on the next one. Like I'll get one for a set. In that video, I was talking about the 49 Leaf set. I'm sorry, the 49 Bowman set. Yep. And I get one and I put it in there. And all I'm thinking about are the big cards I don't have from the set, rather than all the great cards I do have from the set. And I try to go through and look at them. But I think, as collectors, that's just the way it is. We're focused on the chase all the time, rather than appreciating what we have sometimes.
And what are your thoughts on that? Like how would you suggest or recommend? Is it, the simple thing is, look at your cards that you own more often. Let's enjoy what we have instead of always coveting the next thing. But do you think that it's part of the collector DNA that we are always looking for the next one? Like, why can't we just sit back and enjoy what we have? I've been thinking, and I'm not going to do this. I don't have the wherewithal, but I was thinking maybe I would institute a 2-month holiday from buying new cards. I'm not going to do it, but if I did, maybe I would enjoy the cards I already have a bit more. What strategy would you look to walk the walk?
Well, I've done that. I haven't been buying a whole lot lately. I just started buying a little bit more recently, but I haven't been buying a whole lot lately. And what I've been doing is going through. I've been reholdering. I've been looking through my sets, some sets that I haven't looked through in a long time. Reholdering some cards. I got some, so they make these PSA sleeves now. Like I like to sleeve all my cards, all my slabs. And they make these sleeves now that are outlined in black to kind of look like the SGC slabs for PSA slabs. And you know how if you have like a few SGC slabs and then you have a few PSA slabs, they don't look nice when you're looking through them. So if you put these black sleeves on them, they kind of blend better. So I bought a bunch of these, and I've been re-sleeving some cards, and I've been looking through them, and they look so much better together. They match up a little better. And I try to do things like that and just make it more interesting to look through the cards I already have.
What about you, Joe? What do you do to enjoy the current state of the collection?
Yeah, no, I really appreciated your video, John, and it got me looking at my cards a little more just in the last few days. But I think sometimes it's unfortunately, well, it could be a player experiencing success if they're a current player playing. In some instances, it could be a player passing away. You know, when Willie passed away, I got out all my Willie cards. When Pete Rose, you know, I mean, so sometimes it's a life event. But you know, the thought went through my mind after I watched your video, John, how much in the pie chart of my own hobby experience is it the idea that I own the card? Like I know I have that 49 Bowman Satchel Paige, and I'm so glad I do. I know I got it. It's in the safety deposit box. I'm not looking at it very often, but I have it and I know it. And I can look at it from time to time when I go to the bank or if and when I take it out, versus, you know, some cards that I'm kind of looking at all the time and or just a little more proximate to. And I just wondered in my own mind, I don't have a clear-cut answer, but I just like, how much of it is the concept of knowing I own it and how much is actually enjoying it and really experiencing it on a somewhat regular basis?
Yeah, you know, for me, and this is for me, hands down, the number one card I would want from that set is the Satchel Paige. And I have that card. But I find myself focusing on the cards I don't have from that set. Like I don't have the Jackie. I don't have the Larry Doby. So I find myself focusing on those cards rather than enjoying all the great ones I already have.
One of the things, like, not one, I have a couple, unless Joe, did you have a response to that? So what I used to do when I was working in my old career and I would have Christmas break off, I would often, if I was in town, I would sit with my collection at my laptop and I would kind of take that time to spreadsheet everything and maybe take the time to value the cards. So I would have everything out and I would look at them and I would, that's what I would do. I would kind of reorganize these things. So if you want to look for ways to enjoy your cards more, you can either maybe you get a new scanner. I know people get a new scanner. They rescan their cards into their collection. That is one way to hobby. You're actually handling your cards. You get to look at them. You get to hold them. Maybe you're going to revalue them once a year, twice a year, once a quarter, whatever you want to do, whatever you can handle. And then the other way that you can enjoy your cards is to resort them. You know, resort them by year, resort them by team, by sport, however you buy. Whatever you want, by value, whatever makes sense to you, because I often want to like look at my cards in different ways. I want to pull out, you know, maybe a few Hall of Famers and put them together in an image, or I want to do a few 48 Leafs together, or a few, whatever it is. But every time you do that, you're messing up the sort of your card, right? So, but that's messing up the sort allows you to play with them, and then you got to put them back in a new under a new system or an old one. But these are some ways that you can kind of enjoy what you already have. And I feel if we're going to talk about, you know, do you look at your cards, which was one of your video topics, John, I think we should maybe try to give a few sort of ideas onto how to do that, or what can really get you.
I have near sets from like the early 1900s on. And so when I go through, you know, obviously, clearly, I have tons of cards that are not in slabs, right? It would cost me $1 million to grade them all. I'm not going to do that. So it's easy for me to go through and I take a look at the holders they're in or whatever. Hey, maybe this deserves a Mag Pro, or maybe I'm going to get some more. I like to use the semi-rigids. Dude, I'm buying these things all the time. I got like all these semi-rigids, and I'll just sit through, and it's very meditative for me. And I'll put them in fresh new holders, sometimes even with the sleeves over top that I get from Superior Fit Innovation. And it allows me to look at those cards and take a really close look at them too. Many times, some of these cards I haven't looked at for years, like really looked at, you know. And one of the rabbit holes you could fall into, though, is as I'm looking through these, I stumble upon one or two here or there. I might want to upgrade. Then you got another problem. You got another rabbit hole. But it allows me to look at all these cards again, almost for the first time, because it's been a while, and it's fun and it's meditative for me.
Yeah, you mentioned there reholdering. You know, maybe you decide you want to put things in new holders for whatever reason. That's one other way that you can do it. Now, guys, I want to just let everybody know in about 5 minutes, I think Leighton's going to show up. He's going to tell us a crazy story about a buying trip he just went on, and then we'll come back to some of the Mangini topics. But that was one of them. Do you look at your cards? I wanted to talk about that. I think we've done that. Happy to hear any thoughts from the chat about that. But the next one on my list, John, is you mentioned, and you've said this before, I've heard you say it a few times, rough cuts are a delicacy. And I like the way you use the word delicacy because, you know, especially with a background in hockey cards that I have, we're very used to the rough cuts in O-Pee-Chee. And I know that baseball card collectors who collect O-Pee-Chees are used to the O-Pee-Chee rough cuts. It wasn't just with hockey. It affected their baseball cards too. So why are rough cuts a delicacy when it comes
to me they're a delicacy because with O-Pee-Chee we're used to them, right? That's how O-Pee-Chees came. I don't even want an O-Pee-Chee that doesn't have a rough cut, to be honest with you. But they're rare with tops. Like, you don't see them a whole lot with tops. And I love to see those things. And, you know, I might be weird and in the modern world of grading where everybody wants a 10 or a 9. To me, like miscuts and rough cuts and all that kind of stuff, those are true one-of-ones. They're true one-of-ones. They're the only ones out there. Because even if you have multiple rough cuts, none of them are rough cut in the same way. They're just fabulous. I don't know why. I've always been drawn to the rough cuts. And I've always loved the O-Pee-Chees. You know, when I was young, my grandparents, I went on a trip with them to Canada, and they bought me a box of O-Pee-Chee cards. But have to set together with the O-Pee-Chee cards, and I noticed right away the difference between O-Pee-Chee and, you know, tops. And I was just drawn to them right away. And they weren't, you know, they're much more scarce in the United States. And we go back to the 60s and look what people are paying now for like a 69, you know, Clemente O-Pee-Chee versus a Tops O-Pee-Chee, a Tops Clemente. And I know some of the people in this hobby, Dylan, used to think that O-Pee-Chee were fake cards or didn't want them. And I always wanted to get them because I knew that they were, you know, more scarce here in the States.
And that makes them a delicacy because they are more let me ask you this. Are O-Pee, in your mind, when you say rough cuts are a delicacy, does that only apply to tops or does that apply to O-Pee-Chee too?
Well, it applies to both, but they're much more rare with tops.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Like I said, I don't even want an O-Pee-Chee if it's not rough cut because that's what makes an O-Pee-Chee an O-Pee-Chee. Right. I want my O-Pee-Chees rough cut.
And, you know, when I see an O-Pee-Chee, especially, you know, a 79 or especially, let's say just a Gretzky rookie. If I see an O-Pee-Chee Gretzky rookie with super sharp edges, the red flags go up for me right away. So it is somewhat preferred from a confidence in authenticity perspective.
Well, I think about that too, where the rough cut's trimmed off, you know, because I think it's easier to trim an O-Pee-Chee because of the rough cuts, to be honest with you.
Because the rough cut is excess. That's why that's why PSA doesn't penalize a rough cut. If you've got the blue border to the edge and then you've got all the fray coming off the edge, that is it's excess material. They don't tend to penalize it, and
it's naivety to trim an O-Pee-Chee rough cut because PSA will give it a 10. And so you're new to the hobby or you don't know, you know, if you're trimming it. True. You think it's not going to get a 10 because you don't like the look of it, but they will get a 10.
It may, it may. It's not going to cause it not to. It's not
right.
Preclude it from getting the 10. The rough cut doesn't mean it's automatically in imperfect condition.
Yeah, I saw somebody had posted a rough cut on Facebook in this Facebook group, and some guy said, "Oh, that's a shame. You should send it for professional trimming, and it will get a higher grade." And I'm like, this guy doesn't know anything about cards because they will give it a 10. If it deserves a 10, they'll give it a 10. Like and what's professional trimming? Like I got really triggered by this comment. Like this is clearly somebody that doesn't know cards a whole lot. And this is where we're at is the first thought is this beautiful card, this beautiful delicacy of a card. And your first thought is to trim it so it gets a higher PSA number. Ah, man, that triggers me.
I mean, I think a lot of us, we like our cards the way they came out of the pack. So
yes,
right now, Now let me ask you this, John. And Joe, get your thoughts on this too. When PSA at the outset made the decision not to penalize an O-Pee-Chee Gretzky rookie or others for having the rough cut, because really some rough cuts can be quite ugly. Some can be like there's a range of the way a rough cut can impact the eye appeal of a card. Sometimes you've got a super rough card on one edge and a lot of a different rough cut on the other edge. I don't think that's an eye appeal benefit, whether it's a technical grade or not. That's what we're talking about. But do you agree, John, that that PSA made the right decision at the outset not to penalize the card for having a rough cut?
I agree 100%. That's how they were cut. And I agree with you that some don't have the eye appeal of others. That's a different story. But yes, I agree 100% that they should be, they should give it a 10 if it warrants it, because that's the way they were cut. I have a problem with the extreme number of minimum size that they give today, because we all know, anybody that opened packs back then know that they weren't all precisely the exact same size. And how are you giving all these such a high percentage rate of minimum size? Then you're sending them to SGC and they're giving them a number, or vice versa. It's like, what are you basing this on? You hear stories of old guys who pulled these from packs and they're getting minimum size because that's how they came out of the packs.
I think they're doing that because I think they will say min size on some cards because otherwise the card is too small for their holder. But then
I'll tell you why they're doing it.
John, then you look at some holders where the cards are floating around. There's all sorts of room. So you're right. It doesn't make sense.
Well, my belief, and this is just my belief, is, a few years ago, Evan Mathis, the NFL football player, came out and he was showing how he trimmed these cards, and PSA gave him high grades. And I think they went overboard. I think they were a little paranoid that all these guys were sending them trimmed cards that they were putting numbers on. And I think they just got too strict on it. Because they had egg on their face. That's embarrassing. When you have an NFL player coming out and showing you that he sent these trimmed cards in and they got grades. So I think that's why. I think they're being too cautious.
Well, and the problem with that level of caution that they're exerting is that they are, in essence, devaluing a lot of people's cards.
Yes, they are.
Because it's not the submitter's fault that card is too small for the PSA holder or for whatever other reason. If it came out of the pack that way, there's no such thing as min size. That is a PSA fabrication.
Yes, why are they the ones who determine what that card size should be?
Exactly.
I say that with hand cut cards all the time. When you're in the first grade, you're taught to cut inside the lines, inside the dotted lines. You learn that in the first grade. But if you cut a hostess card inside the dotted lines, you're getting an authentic. If you cut a bazooka card inside the dotted line, you're getting an authentic. It's got to be cut outside the dotted lines or it's an authentic, because that's a PSA rule. That's not a card collector rule. They made that up.
Exactly. It goes for box bottoms as well. Okay, let's do a few comments. We're going to go to a few comments here. Leighton just got here, so we'll do the comments. Then we'll bring Leighton on. Let him tell his story, and we'll get back to some more Mangini topics here. But first of all, Triple V in the house. What's going on? Triple V says Mangini for 2028. Already the campaign has started. Matthew says, I wanted to thank Mangini for turning me onto the Colgan's chips Wagner. I snagged one recently and I'm super happy with it. Congrats on that, Matthew. Bob Boozle says, I think documenting the collection on YouTube like Mangini does is a good way to celebrate the thrill of the hunt. Right. Another way is just doing YouTube videos or content anywhere. Yankees fan says, I tried a pause in buying. It didn't last long. It is the hunt. Yeah. Bob Boozle says, my wife's pie chart is quite large. Brett S. from Down Under. As a hockey collector, I don't have vintage baseball cards, but Mr. Mangini's knowledge and passion for them has me wanting to add a few to my collection. You're converting one collector at a time. That's a nice comment. Matthew says the reset or resleeving is great. I'm a big scan guy and also spend a lot of time making albums and resorting the images on Flickr. Nothing beats cards in hand, though. I'm with you on that. Mookie said, consuming my own collection is my favorite thing to do. I can get through 4 binders, 4 shelves, and 4 boxes in about 4 hours. That's the 4-4-4 plan right there, Mookie. He goes on to say, I thought O-Pee-Chee was the Ojibwe word for rough cut. Yeah, very good. And Matthew says Rough Cuts also happens to be the name of a great YouTube show featuring none other than 1956 Topps guy. All right. Let's now bring out Leighton. Are you good to go? Guys, Leighton is at Fanatics Fest, but he's taking time away from the nightly festivities to join us. So, John, we're going to bring Leighton on, and we're going to hear about a fun story. Let's bring him on right now, Leighton. How you doing,
Jeremy?
buddy?
Can I ask him something before you? Hey, Leighton, I've been watching a card you're selling. We need to make a deal on it.
Sure.
You've had it on eBay for a while.
Someone. Absolutely, John. I'd be happy to reach a deal and save fees, whatever platform we were going to pay it to. So.
There you go. Well, you guys make sure you get in touch with each other. Leighton, you are at Fanatics Fest. Really quick, how was your day at the big show?
Sure. So I was there all day yesterday, part of the day earlier today, and it's a lot of fun. Meaning, it doesn't matter really if you're a card dealer, a collector, you're someone who's a sports fan, your son's a sports fan, your cousin, your father. Listen, it's a little pricey. So I just want to caution you that, in other words, if you buy a ticket, you buy a hot dog, you breathe, you decide to use the bathroom, those kind of basic human necessities, you're probably talking, a few $100 for you and let's say your son or your dad or something like that. But that aside, there's a ton of entertainment. And so I don't really know of another event where you're able to go shoot a hockey puck, but then also have your kid go play red ball, which is like a tennis thing for young kids. And so, it's just a super fun event. And of course, the card aspect is just one of them. People are chasing around celebs. I was at Grand Slam Collectibles on Friday. I'm not exaggerating. I almost got ran over looking at some vintage cards. I'm like, did someone steal something? I swear to God, that's how much commotion was going on. No, it was, oh my God, I'm embarrassed to say. CJ Stroud. Sorry, it was CJ Stroud. Was, they had like a film crew. I'm like, wow, things have come a long way. But joking aside, it's been great and a lot of fun.
The content coming out of there, I'm getting pounded by it on all my socials, and I'm having a little bit of FOMO, not a ton. I'm having some FOMO. I would like to be there, but I'm not. We're here Saturday night, Sports Cards Live. It's still a good place to be. But glad that you're having a good time, Leighton. Look forward to hearing more about it. Now, before you tell us the story about a buy trip that almost went very, very bad, I just want to. Michael Ham here says, "What's up, guys? Mangini, when are we getting steak again?" So that sounds like fun. And Vintage Card Collectors has so much hype and discussion on the Honest Wagner for it not to hit the reserve. Reserves on auctions are the worst. I completely agree with that, Vintage. And just to show you guys, there it is. It has ended, and it was a pass. This card did not sell. Now, Leighton, you and I talked about that on the most recent episode of the Vintage Spotlight. We got it. What's your take on the fact that this thing didn't even sell for what I thought was a very healthy amount?
Well, it's interesting because when we talked about it, Jeremy, I said I didn't think he was going to get another bid. And it turns out that I guess whoever owns it wants more, or maybe the person who owns it has 4 of them, who knows? Listen, I think it seems like a very healthy price to pass on. And I guess the question to ask is, how much validity do we now place with that ending price? Because it passed. In other words, is it worth that? I don't really, I'm not in the market for one at that level. So it's just more conjecture and interesting discussion.
Well, and it's interesting that I can't see what the highest bid was on here right now. It seems to have disappeared. Maybe that'll show up later on. But yeah, the card doesn't end. Very. What do you think, Joe? I mean, it's really. It's a downer. It's a bummer that this thing doesn't end up selling, right? It's a big card. You want it to sell. It doesn't. Golden doesn't get its cut. They can't be pleased. What are your thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, kind of anticlimactic and a bit of a buzzkill for all of us looking for, that vicarious thrill of a Wagner going somewhere. But, I guess, people have their bottom line, what they need, what they have into it, and I'm sure it'll come up again. So
any thoughts from you, John?
I hate reserves. An auction is the true value of the card, what people are willing to pay for it. So he probably wanted, way a lot more, and that was wanted to get that money or not sell it.
Yeah, well, Orlando lets us know high bid was 4.128 million with the buyer's premium, and then Mookie says, does an ending price that isn't paid a comp? Like, and not just one that isn't paid, but
that's a good
reserve.
question. That's a good question.
That's a good question. Is it a comp? He says no, right? I would argue that it's not a comp because there's no transaction, but it's a really interesting data point that I think buyers and sellers could somewhat rely on, unless there's funny business going on. Because if anybody knew what the reserve was, they could and the consignor knows what the reserve was. If the consignor were to have shared that with anybody and those people are bidding, they know what not to bid to buy the card. So they could bid it up to just under the reserve, and then it's not a good data point. So, 90s auction, Josh says no, not a comp. It's certainly not a comp, but it is a data point, and then you have to decide if you believe it or not.
But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, that's a beater. What do you think about $4 million for that?
Let's go to Leighton on that.
Do you think it's low? Do you think it's high?
Sorry, John. I would have bought the restored one from Mile High and had $2 million left over, or it looks like now $2 million plus. And I know people are not happy and have plenty to say as to why they don't like the restored version, and I agree. But there's still pride in ownership, and to be fair, I feel like I'd find a way to flip it and then start to work my way to a better one. But that's what kind of makes us card collectors all part of this crazy little community. So.
You call it a beater, John. It is a beater. I call it a disaster. Now, I mean, I'm of course, being a little provocative there, but this thing this thing looks like it would fall apart in your hands if you were to hold it. It's got bends that are all the way through the thing here. But again, I would love to own it, but I'm not in that game at all at that.
That's the thing. We there's lots of cards we want to own, and I would be thrilled to have that card. But there comes a point of how much are you willing to pay for a card in that condition?
Exactly. So, interesting stuff. By the way, Orlando said, Leighton, great interview with Nat Turner. I saw the drop. I haven't had time to watch it yet, but I look forward. And I was a little bit disappointed that I noticed it was only like 36 or 37 minutes. I was hoping I'd get an hour of entertainment out of that. What do you say?
Listen, I had to fight and pay extra for the 37 minutes, believe me.
I bet. Okay, good. Well, I look forward to watching. Okay, Leighton, you told me the story the other day about this buying trip, and I thought that this would be really interesting for people to hear because, again, you come on here pretty much every Saturday. You often tell us about what's going on in the world of professional baseball card treasure hunting, and you're out there, you're pounding the pavement, you're hitting the streets, you're not leaving no stones unturned. Tell the story, guys. I think Joe, John, and all the chat, I think you guys will find this entertaining. Leighton, floor is yours.
Sure. So first, I'd have to say I didn't know that our little kind of like off-camera talk was going to turn into this, Jeremy. Exactly, but nonetheless, I'll dive into the deep end of the pool, and hopefully I don't drown.
Well, listen, I apologize. I didn't know that I was going. I didn't realize I was kind of maybe going into uncharted territories here, so I apologize. But if you're willing to tell the story, you don't have to.
No, listen, it's well, certainly now, I feel compelled.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, it's okay. So, in a nutshell, when I hit the road, like many of you, I guess, that may either do this full time or imagine doing this full time, right? You have to be responsible. This is not just about, going to a concert for a weekend and like maybe you stay an extra day. No, listen, there's bills to pay, and nonetheless, I enjoy it, but I try to be as calculated about it and realistic in terms of the planning and the due diligence and all that good stuff. So long story short, I was going out to see a collection or a collector, and I wasn't even buying his entire collection, but I was buying a lot of his cards. And he was just outside the Cleveland area. So we had reached a deal in principle for his vintage sets, as well as a handful of graded cards. But out of the graded cards, there was one that was really expensive. So fast forward, I'm there. Oh, and to be clear, so I've flown out one way and I plan to be driving back. And to be clear, I hope the vehicle is filled not just with stuff from this person's collection, but candidly, I'm advertising. You know, I'm getting up at 6:30 in the morning talking to people about 1990 Pro Set. You know, there's all sorts of wacky stuff happening when you're on the road, right? But anyway, kind of getting back to center. So I get there, and keep in mind that with as many sets as I went through, there was a little bit of deviation. But what I mean is there was for each set, there was a handful of the stars and rookies graded. And so I had peeked at these sets very briefly. When I say very briefly, maybe I had like done one of those, you flip through the binder kind of super fast. And I knew for each set, as long as they stayed consistent with those graded cards. And by the way, that's where grading really does help. So especially to someone like me, you know, if I'm buying a set on the blind and I'm trying to agree to something in principle over the phone and let's say through email and pictures and such, it really does give me a wonderful guidance as to what the average or general condition or range of that set might be. And in this case, it really did. So we're going through the sets, and I think off the top of my head, I remember making a note that the 61 top set was missing the Hank Aaron, and I'm saying to myself, Leighton, don't sweat it. If this is the biggest effing problem that you have with all these sets, you've done great. Because, you know, usually there's a lot more deviation than just missing a 61 Topps Hank Aaron out of a run of tens of thousands of dollars of vintage sets. So anyway, you got to realize at this point, I think I'm on easy street because the vintage sets have a lot more chance of like a delta and spread, right? So at this point, I have to get to the graded cards, and I'm going through the graded cards, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is the such and such really expensive card in the collection. And so I look at the front of it, and I'm like, it's not the best, you know, 8, but I turn it over, and I'm like, huh. I almost felt like I was on, or watching, for those who watch Seinfeld, I think George was trying to give Elaine a sweater, and the sweater has this red dot, okay? So keep in mind, I'm looking at this PSA 8 of a $20,000 card, and I flip it over, and I'm like, huh, what's that in the case? It's like a loose piece of sizable plastic that's flush against the back of the card. I'm like, huh, that's an interesting note. Like, you know, make a note, go through everything. So fast forward from there. Keep in mind, like, I'm not thrilled about it, but I have a plan, and I want to talk to the gentleman about the card. A buddy of mine had referred me to this individual, so he's actually there, kind of in the background, talking with him and all that good stuff. So anyway, we get down to it. I don't even mention the 61 Topps Aaron. So by the way, if he's watching this, now you know your 61 set's missing an Aaron. But anyway, so we get to the graded, and I explained to him that the sets have gone pretty well. Here's the scoop with the graded, but here's the deal with your most expensive card. And so I explained to him that this is what you should do. You should get it reholdered with PSA. It's a process. I think you're going to the National. You should bring it with you, you know, do it on site, and then obviously have your fingers crossed. And he's like, fingers crossed? What do you mean? I'm like, oh, well, you know, at this point, I'm assuming he doesn't know. I'm like, well, here's the deal. When you reholder a card that's in a little bit of an older holder, especially with floating debris, and pardon me for being so blunt, I'm like, there's no guarantee. And then, of course, you know, he's this older gentleman. He's got some feistiness to him like we all do. And he thinks I'm like trying to, I don't even really know what, other than I'm delivering to him, I guess, not the best news, right? So with a straight face at this point, he's like at least breathing because he definitely wasn't happy for a minute. And he's like, deal's off. I'm like, I'm sorry, did you sneeze? I thought he sneezed. He's like, the deal's off. I'm like, the deal's off. So I stay calm. I'm thinking the deal's off. Like, I'm a very positive person. So, you know, I'm thinking pretty good at this. So I'm like, thinking the deal's off. All right. He means the deal's off for this graded card. Obviously, I'm not buying this graded card until it's reholdered without floating debris, right? So he then starts to specify, he's like, yeah, the entire deal is off. And so I'm like, okay, so listen, I reminded him of how we had an agreement via email, which, listen, you know, to those lawyers out there, maybe Paul Lesko knows, I think is pretty close to an agreement. But that being said, we're not trying to go tit for tat. I'm just merely explaining to him, hey, this is what the email said. And it said I would verify your cards. So this is what I'm doing. I'm verifying. And I verified there's floating debris in the $20,000 PSA card you have. And so what I'm doing is I'm advising you what to do so that I can buy your card still at the agreed upon rate after you get it reholdered. And so he didn't like, of course, the news. Long story short, he says the deal's off. And I'm like, oh, well, this isn't great. You know, I've flown out here. And he makes some like remark as to when we're going back and forth. I keep my cool. He goes, I'll cover your flight. And I say to him very calmly, but also at this point, I'm a little bit, I would say, bothered to say the least, right? I'm like, are you also willing to cover my one-way vehicle back to New Jersey for $1,150, but it might be plus tax? I don't think he liked the plus tax part. And so anyway, he was like, why is it so much? I don't know. Do you want to call Enterprise and negotiate with them? I'm like, listen, I don't know exactly what's happened here, but I try to keep us all calm. I'm like, listen, this is what the email said. And there was some minor discrepancy with the sets. I'm like, the sets are a large part of the value also. And so I'm like, I can understand your disappointment. But I said, I hope you can appreciate, I can't take this card and pretend that I don't see floating debris, try to sell it to a discerning collector, maybe even someone who has a lot of money and actually doesn't really quite understand the nuance of grading and even will flip it over. But that's certainly not good business for me. I'm also not going to try to give it to an auction house, meaning pretend, once again, I don't see floating debris on the back of this $20,000 PSA 8. And so long story short, we don't end up in a good place and we effectively take a break. I'm like, listen, I'm heading out of town tomorrow. We'll chat in the morning. So I'm not sure if he talked to his wife, a good night's sleep. He ate breakfast and that was really good. But when I came back, we had a meeting of the minds. And actually what happened was he took some breaths, he relaxed. He saw that even though he was disappointed, I was trying to help him. I wasn't just trying to put the problem off on him. I was actually trying to help him solve it, but I was also bracing him for the worst, which I'm sure you can appreciate in my spot. It's not the greatest spot to be in because if this card, and I explained to him, he was like, well, what's the worst that could happen? I said, well, theoretically, if the card, this floating debris causes damage when they reholder it and there's, an indentation, I said they could put it in a 3 or a 4. And he knew exactly what that meant for value. He starts to turn flush. I'm like, listen, but I'll help you through this. Just understand, though, that I have no intention of submitting this on my own. I don't want a part of like this, bomb that's maybe waiting to explode, i.e. this floating debris. But I said, this is not the right way to handle it. In other words, ignore that it's there. And I think he respected me for kind of standing my ground. But it took a lot of patience. And it took, kind of standing in the face of uncertainty, if you will. Thousands of dollars on the line, but even more importantly, my time. Because even though I had other appointments, this was what I would like to call the anchor appointment. So when I travel, I like to have a big appointment, whether it be a collection, it could be a dealer I'm buying at, it doesn't really matter to me, but some bigger reason as to why I'm traveling and getting on a plane. And in this case, that was this collection. And so to come full circle, we were able to reach a deal on most of it. And he actually did sell me the graded cards in the end, sans the $20,000 PSA 8 of the key card. And I'm going to assist him at the National and explain to him, at the PSA booth, this is what you're going to do, and we're going to hope for the best. So,
Leighton, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking to think about it from his side for a second. A lot of people who are selling their collections can be very skeptical of buyers in this industry, in the world of baseball cards. So I understand his initial abruptness and surprise, but on the same token, I think we have to give you immense credit for representing the hobby the way you did with such professionalism, trying to help him through it, not getting yourself in a huff and a puff and getting excited, staying calm. I think you did the hobby a really by the hobby, I mean the transactional part of the hobby, the buying, selling, the disposing of collections when people get older. I think you did that whole area of the hobby a really nice service by representing it well and putting a good name to people who do come out and buy collections like that. So I say kudos to you for that. I understand his initial reaction, and sometimes you do just have to sleep on it, think about things, and recognize that, hey, this person is not trying to take advantage of me, which you were not doing. So I see both sides. I think it's an interesting story. I'm glad you shared it. John, any thoughts on Leighton's story? Joe?
Oh, no, I would agree with Jeremy. I mean, it's good to be patient in those moments, and hopefully people's inner wisdom will emerge. But yeah, I just kept thinking, how the heck did that piece of plastic get in the holder? That's where my brain was.
Believe me, he asked me that. And of course, I gave him like 4 different ways, and he's like, "Well, I don't understand." I'm like, "Listen, just because the card's worth 20,000, the plastic's worth 20 cents." And he laughed for like a second because I tried to I try to bring some levity to the situation. No one's trying to hurt you, but understand that I'm professional at what I do, and this is an issue. This is a problem. It can be dealt with. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Someone else might try to sugarcoat it, but I'm explaining to you this is the real deal. This is the actual scoop.
John, any thoughts before we move on?
Well, I think Leighton handled it perfectly. And, when people slab a card, they think that's the end all be all. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen debris in those holders. When PSA changed their standards, I look at all these 10s going, that's now a 9, that's now a 9, that's now a 9 with the centering. And when people are selling cards, they get passionate and they don't want to hear that. But that's the truth.
Yeah. Hey, okay, so Leighton, both Linda's First and Laura want to congratulate you on your 100th episode of Trading Card Therapy. When I mentioned the Nat Turner interview earlier, it just didn't click to me. I knew it was episode 100. Well, I knew it because I remember your last one was 99. But what's interesting, I don't know if you know this, Leighton, episode 100 of Sports Cards Live also featured Nat Turner. So
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And it's very cool, and I appreciate, certainly the thanks, and for those people who've tuned in, and to the guests for the last 25 or so episodes. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, follow Leighton on Instagram, Leighton_Sheldon, just_collect. His podcast is Trading Card Therapy, and check out the Vintage Spotlight podcast on podcast and YouTube as well. Okay, well, Leighton, you're welcome to stick around for a bit more. I kind of, you're usually on for half an hour. We're coming up to that, but you're welcome to stick around for a few more minutes if you'd like. We're gonna switch focus now, guys, and the next topic. So, Leighton, what we were doing is we're going through a bunch of things that were that Mr. President John Mangini has been passionate about in his content lately, and the next one is quantity versus quality. And this one sort of, John, in my mind, this topic has relevance to the do you look at your cards topic, which we already covered. The more cards you have, the harder it's going to be to look at them all. And that's where quality versus quantity is a way that you can kind of set your brain to think about, especially if you want to enjoy your cards more. You can go more with the quality over the quantity. Just my preliminary thoughts on the topic.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
What does what mean in particular?
Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't you have quality and quantity? And what is quality? When I put that video out, you know what people define quality as? It's worth a lot. So before COVID, the Sanella Babe Ruth must have been junk, and after COVID, when it was worth $5,000, now it's quality. So it wasn't quality, but now it's quality. Like, what is quality? You're basing it just on value? Because that changes all the time. So you have, I don't know, Wander Franco was quality, and the next day he was not quality anymore. And that's what I'm getting at. Like, what is quality? Is that the only definition? Is the value?
I think, yeah, that it's you're right. And I love that. And one of the things I think about is sometimes you say, why can't it be both? Well, it just depends on what you want and what your budget is, right? But if I have $10,000 a year to spend on sports cards, I can buy one card for 10 grand, or I can buy 1,000 cards for $10 each. I can do both. So I think quality is inherently related to value, John, but there's more to it in this hobby because the hobby is not one way. There's millions of ways to hobby. So I think you have to define.
Okay, so I have a rare 1928 Tabacalera, John McGraw. It's the only card set ever issued out of El Salvador. It's the only one ever graded. I didn't have to pay a lot of money for it. Is that not quality? It's quality to me. It's quality to me. It's the only John McGraw ever graded.
So your topic here,
it's not worth $4 million. It's not quality. Like, this is what I'm getting at.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you right now. Maybe I sort of misunderstood. I don't think I did. I watched the video, but just to clarify for everybody, when we say quality versus quantity, you're not necessarily talking about the decision between owning one card that is widely recognized as being iconic or very important, or a card that is going to cost you a lot of money. You're also not maybe talking about a gem mint copy of a card condition wise versus a bunch of lower condition cards. You're really getting into the heart of it, I think, which is what is quality to you as a collector? And you're actually saying, who cares about quality versus quantity? It's
I think quality is different to everyone. And I don't think it's necessarily just based on value, right? I mean, a value could plummet tomorrow. Some player does something stupid. Some star, up and coming rookie breaks his leg, whatever. So he was quality yesterday, but he's not quality anymore. And then what is quantity? How much is quantity? 100 cards, 5,000 cards, 10,000 cards? What? I don't know. Understand it's a common thing to say quantity or quality. Yeah. I don't understand why it has to be one or the other.
I think some of it has to do with your ability to consume what you have as well, right? We were talking about before. Do you look at your cards? When I went through my Joe Jackson consolidation, I broke up my 1910 and 1911 Imperial Tobacco hockey sets, the C55s and C56s. And now I find that when I look through that box, I kept the best cards. I kept the top cards that are most important to me, and they are the most notable players. I would say that's quality. I kept those ones for myself. And now, John, when I have that box and I look through it, I'm not skimming past all the players I don't care as much about to get to the Art Rosses and the Newsy Lalondes. Those are the ones that I see. So reducing my quantity allowed me to appreciate my quality. That's how I look at it for me. So what is quality? What is quantity? Yeah, I mean, there's 1 million Cubs guys got 1 million Cubs cards. That's quantity. I would say 1 million.
Well, you can have quantity that most people wouldn't even want, right? Like you could do that, but it doesn't mean I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, man, because we're not talking about garage filled with junk wax era cards that nobody wants. Like you can have quality and quantity. Let's take your very expensive Shoeless Joe Jackson in a 1.5. Some people would say that that's not high quality because it doesn't have a high number on it. But to you, I'm sure it's quality. To me, it would be quality. So what is quality? Is it quality only have high numbers on it? Is it only based on value? Is your Shoeless Joe quality because it was expensive?
Well, I would argue my Shoeless Joe's quality because it's so beautiful. I put more.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah, I appeal over technical grade all day long for me.
But some people only collect numbers. You know that.
Oh, of course I know that. Of course I love it because it leaves the quality I appeal to those of us who value that more. So.
But there are people that only high numbers are quality to them, and there are people that only high value is quality to them.
Yeah. Oh, that's how, there's a comment in the chat here that I think, it's Linda's first here, says it all goes back to this one notion. The hobby is subjective and all topics in it are subjective. And I think he's right. I think Linda's first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the thing that blows my mind is if it's based on value, if that's what quality is, and it can change in a day. So it was quality yesterday. Now it's not quality anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yep. Listen, you are bringing sort of a perspective to this whole quality versus quantity discussion topic that people talk about all the time, but you're bringing a different angle to it. And I think that's what's interesting. So I'm trying to understand that angle. I think I do. Leighton, what are your thoughts on this line of discussion?
Well, I mean, I think that it's very interesting, and you can continue to make yourselves crazy if you'd like.
It's pointless.
But I'm gonna try to bring some, I guess, lightheartedness to it, but also make some sense of it. So, John, I hear you loud and clear about quality. and I collect heavily as well. But I think you're leaving out a third adjective, or not, excuse me, third adjective, third word, value. And the reason being is because, for example, I was collecting photography and I recognized the quality photo long before they were worth anything, John. And they were absolutely of quality. I didn't care about having quantity. And frankly, I didn't care about value. And candidly, I wish the value would have stayed less because I could be more active in the market. So what I'm saying is these set of terms, they don't fit everyone equally. And it's not fair to say, if someone speaks at the National, for example, and you overhear someone in a booth, well, I only want a quality, I have a Lou Brock right here. I only want a quality Lou Brock rookie. I mean, to me, I know Lou Brock rookie, right? They're really tough. They're tough in high grade, but they're also tough to just find as like a centered card. That card came often off-centered. But you meaning like the person who's selling it, you don't get to decide for the person who's going to consume it, meaning the customer or the investor. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So it's not just for one card, but it could be for a set of cards or for a set of things. And so what I'm saying is these terms that you're talking about, they mean different things to different people. John, I used to live in a 600 square foot apartment in Manhattan in the West Village. And it was way before I was married, certainly before I was divorced. And joking aside, I had to move out of the apartment after leaving Leland's. Because I remember coming home one day, my girlfriend at the time, she had like such a somber face. I'm like, what happened? She's like, I opened the cabinet. The cards came out and like they were everywhere, man. Because I had no space. Did I have too much quantity? Oh, you bet your ass I did. But it was all quality and there was a lot of value. So my point is there's nothing wrong. It's a very healthy discussion we're all having. And I don't think we're going to figure out what's right. And I don't get offended, candidly, when I meet someone who's got millions of dollars like I've seen and met this past convention at Fanatics Fest, and they can buy cards I can't afford. Honestly, I'm humbled they're asking my opinion. And John, I'm sure they're asking your opinion as well. You just may not realize it because they're in like a YouTube and they're watching your videos. But these are people that have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even more, in terms of a budget. And so I just don't want to put a bow on it and say, well, we've decided that this is the right way to consume collecting. You should only have this amount, and you should not talk about value because you're offending the people that, and no, there's no right or wrong. And so when you talk about the value, it's just a different component or a different layer on top of the other two layers, but there really is no like perfect or exact combination because we're all different.
Yeah, and value wasn't part of it. Where that came from is the comments on my video said that the quality was based on value. That was the majority of the comments.
I was certainly watching.
So I was like, so this, that's where I'm coming from. And of course it's subjective, and of course we're not going to solve anything, but it's almost become a cliche thing. You can't collect quality and quantity. It's got to be one or the other.
Joe, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit to what John said earlier about when we were talking about the delicacy of ref cuts. He also mentioned that certain cards, like really off-center cards, have unique qualities to them. And I've got some appreciation for grossly off-center cards that have registration and saturation at a very high level. To me, that is a quality card, even though it would technically probably, get either a huge OC or 2 or 3. So yeah, it just kind of leads into a bit of what I think we're all saying is beauty is in the eye of the beholder and quality is subjective. And, within that, or maybe the umbrella over that is there, we have attempted, I guess, in the industry to more objectively assess what the quote unquote quality is. And maybe we've gone a little bonkers in that process when you think about everything that's been done. I pulled a card out just now. This is an E91 Naples Jouet, and it's a 1, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of that Hans, not because it's worth that, the Honest Wagner, but because of the condition. And I probably got this card maybe, 15 years ago. It's a 1, and it was during a time when I wasn't really paying more than, say, $250 for a card. That was like a very expensive card for me back then. And I mean, I don't think this one's worth all that much more. But the point is, I probably wouldn't own an E90, American Caramel Nap Lajoie if I hadn't resorted to looking at the beautiful parts of this card, which is the color, right? Not the fact that it's got some, it's a Beater Joe card, Jay Lee. It's a Beater Joe card. It's got creases. It's got, very touched up corners, relatively clean back, actually. But the point is that sometimes, it's back to Dan's, moniker own appeal, and just to be able to get into a card. So you might not, I have a feeling Jay Lee wouldn't necessarily want this card. Just what I know about him. I don't know. I mean, he wouldn't throw it out of bed, but I don't think he would go out of his way to try and acquire this card. He'd probably want one that has a higher level eye appeal, but I'm okay with it because at various points in my life, it was really the way I could get into a card within my budget and feel good about it too.
So is that card quality or quantity?
I think it could be considered both because
sometimes the quality is the card itself. A Honest Wagner beater is still quality to me.
Right.
But sometimes it's the grade on the card. Like there might be 10 million 1986 Ricky Henderson tops, but only 3,000 and a 10. So that 10 is quality and the rest are junk, right? So it could be the card or it could be the grade or it could be something totally different. I don't know.
Well, let's go to some comments. Let's hear what the chat thinks about this. We'll run through some of these. First of all, Vintage Card says SGC fans should be thrilled with what Nat said on Leighton's Trading Card Therapy podcast if they believe him. Brad says, I want quantity with quality. Shelton said, quantity is how I buy my toilet paper at Costco. Brad comes back, says, every card I buy 5 or so cards, it means moving through all the cards from the first year on to keep them in year order. I don't know if I follow this comment. Every card I buy, 5 or so cards, it seems moving through all the cards from the first year on to keep them in year order. Midlife Greg says, this panel is quality and quantity. Thank you, Greg. Sundin says, Kirkland toilet paper is pretty good. Showday Cart says, quality resolve in number of important cards you really enjoy in your collection. Yeah, how many do you enjoy? I can see that. Orlando said, as I get older, I'm focusing on cards I really enjoy and selling cards I don't like as much to get cards I always wanted. Triple V says, Mangini hits different with the existential thought process. Yes, I like that he's challenging how we look at this whole discussion topic of quality versus quantity. Vintage Card Collector says, I define buying quality as aiming to purchase the best looking copy I can afford. I upgrade to a better looking copy, not grade, but a better looking copy whenever possible. Jeremy M says, good evening, guys. Glad to be able to listen live for a little while tonight. Thanks for sharing your Saturday night with us. Thank you, Jeremy M. And Vintage Card Collector says, another way to look at quality versus quantity is, would you rather have the number 1 card in a vintage set or the next 3 most important cards, assuming total value is equal? I'll take the most important card. To which Brad says, Vintage Card Collector, I'll take the next 3. 65 Topps Mantle is most expensive. Give me Mays, the Morgan rookie, and the Carlton rookie instead. Very interesting.
But the most important card is subjective.
Correct.
Like for the 49 Bowman, most people would probably say that Jackie's the most important card, but to me, it's a Satchel Paige.
Fair, yeah. Bob Boothel says, finding the answer to this in my autographed Sports Card Investing for Dummies book. He's going right to the source. And Brad says, to me, every card of a Hall of Famer is quality. That makes sense to me. I can definitely.
Can you ask Mookie if his toilet paper has pinholes in it? He collects pinhole cards.
I know exactly. Yeah, that's why. That's a very astute comment there, John. Bob Boozle says to Joe's Honest, it's a nice card, Jeremy. Take it. I don't know that I was being offered that, Mr. Boozle, but if it was offered to me, I would definitely take it. Robert Scott says, quality is subjective to the individual, while quantity speaks to itself. I can see there being some relativity in quantity, but I mean, I think it's maybe easy. It's less subjective, perhaps, than quality. John, do you agree? You're kind of
Well, if you have if you just have one 1978 Topps set, you have quantity, 700 and some cards.
Mhm.
Is that quantity?
Exactly. Yeah. I get it. Frankie,
So you have a 1978 set, all in tens. Is that quality or quantity?
maybe both.
See, this is a deep subject.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna wrap up this particular topic. Leighton, good to see you, buddy. Good luck at the Fanatics Fest. Are you going back tomorrow?
No, I'm done. I wanted to show off 2 cards, though, because I feel like we're on show and tell if we could. The first one is just one that I bought. It actually matches my Brooklyn shirt here. But I was able to pick up only graded vintage. There was no raw vintage that was worth buying. There wasn't a ton of vintage, but this one, I don't want to talk about its quality or quantity, John, but it is a great card. Can I just say great? I've always loved the 53 Campy. It's an 8. It's a pretty decent example, and I like that he's smiling. Love the 53 set.
Beautiful.
So then, John, I'd love to hear your comments as I sign off. I'm going to listen. So this is the dilemma I find myself in, but I'm sure not just as a dealer / collector. I'm sure collectors find themselves in this spot, and I'm curious, what does everyone do? So you have a nice vintage card, and maybe you were going to grade it, and maybe that card wasn't the one you were going to keep for your collection, and you were going to sell it, use that money to fund other pieces. But you didn't get the grade you wanted, and you're like, oh, hot diggity, I see what's wrong with it. But man, it's just a beautiful card. So I don't think I can sell this card. It's just a gorgeous card with a low grade, high eye appeal. Haven't shown anyone yet. And it's got some sort of like, I don't know what the deal is on the back, on the top. Maybe it came out of a scrapbook or something, but it's the 32 U.S. Caramel of Hall of Famer Joe Cronin. And the card literally looks near mint. Like if you look at those corners.
Gorgeous. Wow.
That's beautiful.
But it only got a 2.5.
Very
Dude,
recent
I'd love
grade.
to have that card. You could send it my way if you don't like that number.
But I thought it's not enough of quality and quantity, John.
Well, that's what I said. Some cards, the cards themselves are the quality, right?
So there's the back. If you want,
like the 52 Mantle, people would consider that a quality card and a 1.
So there you go. Like along there's some issue. I don't know if it was in a scrapbook or
it's
something.
It's from 1932.
Yeah.
And Kurt hasn't gotten it yet.
No one's getting it. It's going to be staying with me. It's a beautiful card, and I love it, and I don't think I can sell it. That's the issue. I just love the
I have lots of cards like that they're a lower number, but they just look so good to me. I have no reason to get a higher number. Like, it looks so good to me. I don't care.
But what do you do if you, this is my question for the panel, but as well as everyone watching. But what do you do, John? I'm just making it up. You had 2 of them. You were going to sell one. You go to get it graded or whatever the case is. It doesn't fit your collection. And you're like, wow, this is a beautiful card for the grade. I'm not going to get nearly what I thought. I just got to keep it. I'm curious if anyone's ever able to pull the trigger and sell it.
I'll tell you, I've been in that boat. Not recently, but in the past, I've been in that boat. And I sell the one. I keep the one I like the best. And most of the time, it was the lower grade. Which works out great because you get more money for the higher number.
Right.
I've done the same thing. 1953 Jean Beliveau rookie. I had a 5 and a 7. Loved the 5. The 7 just didn't like it. The borders were too white. It didn't feel like an authentic 1953 card to me. They were both in PSA slabs. Kept the 5, which I bought raw in probably the year 2000. Had it graded myself. Sold the 7. Couldn't be happier to take that money, buy more cards, keep the beautiful 5.
Eye appeal is a real thing. I've had, I had a Joe DiMaggio years ago in like a 7, and he had a spot on his friggin' face, and it drove me insane. And I got rid of that and got a 1, and I love the 1 way better than that 7 because they didn't account for this spot on his face. Sometimes the card just doesn't appeal to you,
Regardless of the grade, even if it is graded, if it is even in a slab, I agree. It's technical grade is one input to the assessing a purchase scenario. it's not the end all be all. You know, it's not even close. So interesting stuff. Leighton, thanks for the show and tell.
Hey, Leighton, I'm sorry, Jeremy, but before you leave, you need to sharpen your pencil on that 1933 Sport King Babe Ruth you had.
There we go.
Only if we figure out if it's quality or quantity, John. I can do it.
I got my eye on a 1933 Sport King in your Just Collect eBay page. When John mentioned that he has his eye on something, I might need to talk to you about a particular surfer icon that
Sure.
has very good eye appeal.
I didn't even want to bring it up
especially
because somebody's
low
going to
grade.
snake it now. Rick the Flipper. Somebody's going to snake it. So I
the
didn't want to
risk
bring
you
it
take,
up,
John.
but it's been in my my eBay cart for a long time.
John, you know, you're good for eBay sales for me, bud. You could come on every Saturday night, man. I feel like I'm really here to change.
That's a really nice example.
Thanks. Looking forward to connecting and doing a deal with both of you gentlemen offline.
All right, Leighton, are you heading off? Or are you going to stick around?
Yeah, no, I'm going to head off, but I really appreciate having me on. And once again, check out, the latest edition of Trading Card Therapy. I really appreciate Nat taking the time, as well as the 24 other guests over the last several months. And then I did Vintage Spotlight recently with Jeremy, so check that out if you get a chance as well. And John, I'll be sure to check out your episode about quality and quantity.
I think this is the last time I'm ever talking about it.
I could get back to you with feedback.
All right, thank you, Leighton. We'll see you next
everybody.
week.
See you soon.
See ya.
Take care. Really quick, Nick Chen says, good evening. Glad I could stop by and catch an episode. Usually doesn't happen during baseball season, Nick. Glad to have you here in the chat. And then Vintage Card Collector says, eye appeal will be put to the test when Heritage sells the PSA 10 Wilt Chamberlain rookie card that has terrible eye appeal. And
it'll still go for a fortune.
It'll still go for a fortune. It's probably still going to hit 7 figures, but I don't know that card grades out a 10 under today's PSA grading standards. It's not a new label, so that will be interesting. I noticed that card. The first thing I thought was, ooh, that thing is not centered enough to be a gem mint, in my opinion, but my opinion is not on the slab. So, all right, John, let's move to the next topic. Joe, anything you wanted to jump in with before we do?
I'm good.
Here's another good one. Here's another doozy of a President John Mangini topic, you guys.
Uh-oh.
Investment grade versus collector grade.
Oh,
John.
God, I hate that one.
Well, you brought it up first, so let's why don't you set the table for that one? I've got some thoughts, but let's hear what goes through your mind when I reintroduce it here tonight.
What is the collector's grade? So it's like if it's a 6, if it's below a 6 in 1960, it's a collector grade, right? But if it's a 6, it's an investor grade. Eye appeal out the window, doesn't matter. Old label, graded 20 years ago, doesn't matter. Is that where we're at? So your Shoeless Joe Jackson is not an investor card.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I would think it would be.
That's my point. Like,
yeah, I know.
It's absurd.
Right. So John,
it depends on the card itself.
Where did you invest? This is terminology that I've heard a few times, but it's not everywhere for me. I'm not hearing this in narratives all over.
It's prevalent on YouTube. I got this in a collector grade. I think the flippers came up with this. The people that flip the high numbers just to make you feel insecure with a lower number to almost guilt you into paying them higher for a higher number or something like that. I just find it absurd because it's the card itself that is truly investment grade. If you're buying a T206, that thing got bid up for $4 million. It's a beater. Is that not investment grade?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I hear. No, I know. I'm with you, John. I completely agree with you. I don't think there's such a thing as collector grade and investor grade, especially a PSA 10 61 Fleer Wilt Chamberlain is certainly going to qualify for investor grade, but a collector might buy it because he only collects PSA 10s. In that case, it's a collector grade card as well. But is it truly is that particular PSA 10 Wilt investor grade copy, considering it's uglier than several PSA 9s, and I'm sure we could prove that just by looking at them. So yeah, I think that language, I think it maybe has its place in certain contexts, but I don't think that it is all encompassing and something that can be applied to all cards. I think it might have a few specific places where it might be worthy, but I'm sure you'd see in certain auction house descriptions. Maybe you see it there. Maybe you just see it people talking. Maybe it's a sales pitch, collector grade, investor grade. But really,
I think it's a sales pitch. I think, but it's made its way into the mainstream.
I think so too. So here, let's do a couple. Joe, before I do comments, I want to get Joe's thoughts. Do you think that collector grade and investor grade terminology has a place in the hobby?
Not really. I mean, I think it's a little gimmicky kind of phrase for auction houses, because usually you kind of hear investment grade. I mean, collector grade has a negative connotation in that light, but I know, I mean, what we've been talking about for the last few months is finding collector grades that actually look amazing and that make you happy. So
yeah, and I think that you can own a card. I don't think that the word grade is correct. I think is it an investment copy or I don't think collector copy. They're all collector copies, but is a particular?
That's the thing. They're all collector copies. Like if I'm a collector, I don't want to hire a graded one.
Right. I want the.
I
copy
have to be an investor.
You want the
or
copy,
vice versa.
You want the copy that speaks to you, John. The copy that you love the looks of, irrespective of the holder it's in. Hopefully, it's in a lower grade holder, so you can get it for less money and have more money to buy more cards, because we want quantity and we want quality. So you kind of win both ways there. I think. By the way, Dan has entered the chat. He said, just got home from a family event. Any discussion of own appeal that I missed? Yeah, Dan, we did talk.
Dan, you missed it. We opened with it.
We did it top of the show. We talked about it. Might have come up a couple times since then. Even Brad 31 says no such thing as investor versus collector grade. Collectors collect in all grades. I agree. Right. Hobby Champ says collector grade to me is literally just the highest pop grade of any particular card. The grade that the most possible people can own of any particular card. Right. So yeah, he's talking about the card that has whatever. I understand that. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but you take the whole population report. Do fives have the most copy? If so, there's the most available for the most collectors. Maybe it's a totally different way of looking at it.
That's a totally different way of looking at it. I never thought about it that way.
Makes some sense though. It makes some sense because more people can own it. These things are for collecting. Mr. Boozle says collector grade is a polite way of saying it's crappy. Bless my collecting heart.
That's what it sounds like. What it sounds like.
It really does. Thorson Collectible says, why must we have terminology and complexity to everything? It's dumb. Without collectors, there wouldn't be sports card investing at all. Yeah, I mean, I hear it. But we are humans and we need to organize. The reason why we have terminology is because we need to organize our thoughts. And we do that by categorizing things, by describing them, by labeling them, by organizing them. That's why we need it. But I definitely hear
that's human behavior. But let me just interject here real quickly. I'm sorry. What would we talk about on YouTube if we didn't overcomplicate these things?
Exactly. Right. Foul Ball says keeping it raw is for collecting, grading is for selling. Somebody sent me a message today on Instagram, and they had purchased one of these Fanini flawless. It's a Wembanyama card, but it's in that uncirculated one touch with a Panini sticker over it. Yeah. And he said to me, what would you do? Would you leave it or would you get it graded? And I thought to myself, I'm not giving the grade. I don't need to give them any money to grade this card. It's, but the other thing,
when I used to see people, I used to get the E-tops and they're encapsulated. They're perfect. And when I used to see people grading those, I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand it. It's like you have a pristine card coming from Topps. Maybe you want to spend more money to grade it.
Yeah.
Or you don't trust it. I don't get it.
but they're untouched. So he
They're
asked me,
untouched, yeah.
he asked me, what would you do? And I said, first of all, I don't think I would give the grading company any money to grade that card unless, and like Foul Ball said, unless I was going to sell it. Then maybe if I inspected it through that one touch and I concluded that this thing is going to grade well enough to add value by grading it, more so than the cost of grading, maybe I would grade it just to maximize my return.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I mean, people pay up for the numbers.
Exactly. Oh, you think? Exactly. I love you mentioned E-Tops. I've got a box on my floor with every single E-Tops hockey card that was ever made. Because when they kind of went out of business, I took delivery. I had them all in my John, back in 2000, 01, 02, 03.
I had them, yeah. I still have them in my portfolio. I tried to get them shipped to me, and it was like almost $400. And I'm like, you just keep them. They're not even worth $400.
Yeah, I've had them for years, and I finally took them out. The reason they're even not buried away is because I thought maybe I'm going to just dump these off and get rid of them. And then I look at them, I'm like, these things are beautiful. They are actually beautiful cards.
Yeah,
and they're all in their original E-Tops holders with a little.
Well, you know, back then I watched every hockey game, and I bought every hockey set back then. So I had them too.
Yeah, you know,
I have them sitting in my eBay account right now. Not eBay, E-Tops. Yeah,
I didn't even know you could still log in. Joe, did you ever get into E-Tops? Do you remember those cards?
I did. I never bit.
Did you? But were you aware of them at the time?
Yeah,
they came out around the time of the Pit.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, you remember the Pit?
Yes. Oh, I remember the Pit.
I still have cards there that are worthless, so I haven't logged on in years. Ever since I bought my I bought my Albert Pujols Topps Chrome card through there. I did have delivery of that one.
Yeah.
But they had, I remember the Pirates had an up and coming star pitcher who was supposed to be like Paul Skeens, but his name was Brian Bullington. I'm not even sure he ever pitched in the pros. So they still have my Brian Bullington rookie cards in there.
Yeah. Well, you could get like 10, 20, 100.
Yeah, I didn't do that. I only bought like one or two. I just wanted to have them. So most of the time I just bought one.
Look at this. Look at this.
That was a moment in the hobby where we were like equating cards and stocks, and it was very interesting.
Yeah, for me, I always bought defensively because I wanted to hurry up and get it because I didn't want to have to pay a lot for it later. And I call that like I prospect defensively, if that makes sense. Because if you got the Tom Brady in 2000 versus if you got it in 2005, there was a big difference in what you had to pay for it, right?
Totes.
These are the E-Tops cards. I'm just showing a Chris Chelios from whatever year, and they would put them on IPO. They called it initial whatever offering, and you would, however many were ordered, would be how many they printed, and then they would be in your portfolio on the E-Tops website. They had a direct link to eBay. You could buy and sell them on there. I did a ton of buying and selling on there from the portfolio. But as I was showing, this right here is one of every hockey E-Tops card ever made. And these bags are the bags they came in. They've gone yellow over time.
That's insane you have that many. Now, is that quality or quantity?
It's a bit of both. There are some absolute no names in here that should never have had hockey cards at all. And then there are some really cool cards in here as well of absolute legends. Like there's a beautiful Sergei Fedorov. That's the first year design of E-Tops.
Yeah, the first years carried a lot of value.
Pretty.
And after that, nothing carried value. But those first years carried a lot of value.
I think the best card ever to come out was the Pujols rookie in E-Tops. John, do you know if that's right?
I don't know if that's the best card to ever come out, but I have one sitting in my account, I think.
By best, I just mean most valuable at that point, right?
I mean, when Ichiro and Pujols came out, like, I don't know, I recognized immediately how good they were, and I bought everything I could get my hands on from those two.
Nice, yeah. So let's do a few comments here. Michael Ham says, E-Tops was so clean, wonderful cards. Yeah, they were fun. Brett S says, the Bedard 1-of-1 Shield Auto was graded. Why? It wasn't graded. It was slabbed, authentic, with an auto grade. I think the auto grade got a 10, if I remember, but there was no grade. I wonder why they made that decision. Maybe they didn't think it would grade high enough for the owner's taste, I suppose. Josh Sherber, I was just logging inventory, put 5 Miguel Sano E-Tops minor league onto a spreadsheet. E-Tops maybe E-Tops is making a comeback. Who knows? Hobby Champ says I have low end PC that's raw, but anything higher end is graded or to be graded for authentication and protection. Fair approach for sure.
Unless it has debris in the holder.
Exactly, unless there's debris. Linda's first says show and tell the E-Tops, Jeremy. It's a lot of cards to show as you just saw there yourself. Hobby Champ says old E-Tops of popular players do sell well. Colin Murray, hello, welcome to the show. All right, John. Another top. So I think we're good with investment grade versus collector grade. The next topic I have is oddball. You went off on a video recently about what's an oddball. You know, is that term derogatory? I kind of joked about it when you were in the background today before you came on. But what are your thoughts? What's your issue with the term oddball? Go ahead.
Okay, so it's clearly not a big deal. I'm not gonna get into fights over it. It's not derogatory. It's not like you're insulting the cards. But my problem with oddball is when oddball, the term really came out was in the early days of eBay, when uneducated collectors had a card they didn't know what it was, they would call it an oddball. So if you have a Bell brand potato chip or a Dandy or a Red Heart and they hadn't seen it before, they call it an oddball. If you think about it, right? Decades before Topps came around with cards, there were card issues. They were issued in all kind of different products, right? And there wasn't the standard card we know today until 1957. And people will use the term oddball for anything that's like a non-Topps, non-Bowman, if it's not the right size, if it's, all these different things. But the standard size card did not start until 1957. So should every card prior to that be oddball? Should every card that's not Topps or Bowman be oddball? Because I'm a vintage collector, and if you go, get the standard catalog of baseball cards, go back to the 1800s, look through all those cards, all those products. Cards came in every kind of product you can imagine. They came with shirts in 1935 with the Dean brothers. They came in tobacco. They came in candy. They came in caramel. They came in newspapers. They came in all kind of things. And they're all oddball except for Topps and Bowman? Is that it?
Yeah. Okay. Fair. And I don't know the answer, but I think it is. Hobby Champs.
I don't think there was a single card the size of Topps standard card until 1957. I went back and was looking through my cards. None of them were that size. They were all different sizes. Some were round, some were a little bigger. I think is a T206 an oddball because it's a goofy size, and a T205 and a T207 because they're drawn on. Like, what makes an oddball? And here's the thing: nobody has a set definition on it. And then some people say it's a food issue. Well, isn't gum a food? I think technically gum's a food. You can swallow it, you can eat it. It's a food.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
So Topps is a food issue.
Well, what do you think of this, John? Hobby Champ says oddball just means not mainstream, but for sure there could be a better term for it. What do you think of that?
Well, I don't understand that either, because if you go to, so I'm a vintage collector, so I'm coming from a vintage standpoint. If you go back to the great vintage sets, they were all regional, for God's sakes. Like you look at the Oxford Confectionery, regional. Most of these sets were issued in Pennsylvania, New York. We did not have mass distribution of many cards back in the old days. And that's kind of my point, is they were all kind of regional.
Well, here, Dan says, John is right that oddball is an overused term, but there is a place for the oddball description in the hobby if used correctly. I think simply non-mainstream is the right term. To me, it's non-mainstream.
But what is mainstream?
Like you said before, to me, mainstream.
Why isn't Kellogg's mainstream? Every kid in America got Kellogg's cards. Every kid in America got Hostess cards. Why are they not mainstream? Why are they oddball?
Yeah. No, you got me. You got me on that, John.
Drake's. We could go on and on here all day long. Colgan's chips. How's that different than a T206? Because it's a different shape. They'll call a Colgan's oddball, but not a T206.
I mean, they're all issued to collect the sets, whether it's out of a bag of potato chips or dog food or tops. So, yeah, I mean, I think that you almost have to go back, and I don't know when the term originated, but if you look at the Beckett monthly magazines, which was the gospel for many people for many years, what was listed and what wasn't. I don't think that a lot of these oddball sets were listed in maybe in the annuals.
They were listed in the standard catalog of baseball cards,
but not in the monthly Beckett price guide, which the standard catalog of baseball cards, kind of old news now. It's a great reference, but it wasn't what the mainstream was reading every month and subscribing to.
Well, not every month, but I certainly got one. And they had the Sports Collector's Bible, and they had Baseball Cards magazine, and they had Old Cardboard magazine. I mean, they featured all these cards. These magazines have been around a lot longer than people know. And these cards were around, some of them before Beckett.
All right, let's see what the chat says, but let's go to Joe first.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm maybe we had our guest TJ's online recently, and I hope I didn't offend him by, acknowledging his oddball tastes. Because when I looked at his IG, I mean, he has a lot of those, shakies, pizzas, lids, Hostess, and a lot of it allows you to get into players, in his case, Reggie Jackson, that maybe, they only have so many quote unquote standard issues, right? So myself, I've been opening way more up to oddball. I've always kind of liked oddball cards, but felt like I needed to be more conservative and kind of go for the standards issues. But now, like recently, I've been kind of fascinated with this 1968 Atlantic Oil. I don't know if you know that one. It's hand cut but cool colors, and it starts to merge with pop culture when you get, IC or, different products that you maybe remember from your childhood. I don't remember Atlantic Oil, to be honest, but I do remember, Shakey's, and I do remember, obviously the Hostess, actually literally buying, Mom, no, we need to get this one because it has Reggie on it. And we would get the Hostess, rolls. They were like the trying to remember what they called them, but anyway,
it was the brown ones with the white cream in them.
Yeah, what were those?
Ho-hos.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. So anyway, I've come around to oddballs, and whether we call them oddball or not, we kind of know. I guess again, we're in language, and we're in connotative, the connotations of oddball don't necessarily, but like, let's flip the script. Oddballs are cool.
Well, they are. And my only point is that a card is a card. Cards came in all shapes and sizes. They were distributed by every kind of product under the sun. And just like you said, the Atlantic Oil, American Oil also had them in 68 with, I think it was 68. They had the two that were attached. There's a mantle in there. I have a Willie Mays. So gas stations issued them. They were issued in every product under the sun. And then the other point I will make is simply this. Nobody has a set definition for what an oddball is. It's like, if you don't know what it is, you call it an oddball. Because some people will say, well, it's a regional issue. No, it's not, because you call Kellogg's and you call Hostess oddballs. Those were widely distributed. And then there are other sets back in the day that weren't widely distributed we don't call oddball. Because everything happened like basically up in the Northeast. If you look at all the old vintage baseball sets, many of them, like I said, Oxford Confectionery, Willard Chocolate, those kinds of things, were mostly up in the Pennsylvania, New York area. And then that means that every Canadian set is an oddball. So the 36 Worldwide Gum, the 37 O-Peachy, all those types of cards are oddball, right? Because they were issued in Canada.
Okay, let's do some comments here, John, and then we're going to switch the topic. That's all good. Let's do some comments here. First of all, Bob Boozle, wife called me a loser. I called her an oddball. Yelia Williams says oddball. You know it when you see it. The Cardboard Corner says loved E-Tops. I have the entire E-Tops C206 set that they produced. Very cool. I didn't get those. Midlife Greg says my mom has always called me an oddball, Is that not an endearing term? Cardboard Corner says the Trout E-Tops is pretty sought after. Frankie Gonzalez says, I would say the term oddball applies to post-war era cards after the standardization of what a trading card has come into being. Fair. Bob Boozle, oddball is a good term because it has ball in it. Foul Ball says regional is oddball. Vintage Oddball Cards says John doesn't know what he's talking about. Oddball is a great term for non-mainstream. John, get with the program. Victory Investment says Tito 6 also wasn't in the Beckett Monthly, nor was 33 Gowdy, he says later. Michael Ham says, Michael Ham says, I feel if it's a card, it's a card. People were making rules up as we went, and I feel it was to give brand recognition to mainstream. I blame Beckett. Star is Jordan's rookie card. Foul Ball says John is way off. He is an oddball. And
I'm not going to argue with that one.
And Frankie Gonzalez says, at least in basketball, the term usually applies to a type of card not produced by the mainstream card companies, Panini, stickers, magazine, hand-cut cards, and etc. So just some thoughts.
I just want to make two follow-up points, and that's a good point. When it comes to vintage, there were no standards. There wasn't a Topps producing cards every year. There was always a different company doing it. That was one point. The other point is, as you just read, everybody has their own definition of oddball, so you can't define it.
No, that's fine.
If you can only define it, you can't define it, but you know it when you see it. Like, that's not a definition.
No, it's
somebody
not.
Said regional. Somebody said that. Everybody has a different definition of it.
Colin Murray here says oddball wasn't available everywhere. Tougher to find, rare. A lot of it wasn't found in packs like an insert. John's definition of oddball is odd, not the same in Canada. Topps would be oddball for us in Canada. Very
there
fair.
You go. Topps is oddball. I love that.
Yeah. Okay, so John, I want to do. I had two more topics for you before we switch it up here, guys. John's gonna run soon. We're gonna bring on both Ben Hossler from Rolling Insights and Chris Hoge. We're gonna bring them on together, but I want to do one more topic with you, John.
Okay.
And I think we're going to do the one about grading upcharges, PSA's grading upcharges. And because we were chatting on the phone the other day, and basically one of the things, like, I understand why PSA charges an upcharge on your card. And my understanding is that they do it to fund their insurance, which is their guarantee when they make a mistake. So I understand that piece of it. Doesn't mean I want to pay for it. I don't want to, but I understand their rationale for it. But here's where I have an issue. It seems to me like it only serves the instant seller or the flipper. Because if I pay an upcharge for a card and subsequent to that, while I'm still owning that card, it goes down in value. If they assess it to be a $20,000 card and they charge me according to their scale, and now the card goes down in value, is worth $4,000, are they going to reimburse me that upcharge? Because I still hold the card and it's not worth what it was when they graded it. So to me, it seems like PSA's upcharges are meant for sellers, resellers, flippers, insta sellers. A lot of people grade their cards to keep them for years and years and years. So that's the topic for this. We'll get through this one hopefully kind of quick because we do have Ben and Chris in the back. But that's the topic, guys. And I was thinking about this, and I kind of mentioned it to John. So because of that, Joe, process this. This might be the first time you're hearing it, Joe. But for you, John, maybe you've thought about it a little bit. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I've never understood the upcharge thing. I'm not sure that insurance is true. I mean, when you go to other companies and have services done, do they have different insurance for what they're working on? If you're getting tires and you take your 1986 Chevette in to get new tires, are you charged differently if you bring a Porsche in because their insurance is going up? I don't know. I have no idea. But it never has made any sense to me with that. And you're right, it's one-sided. So, during the pandemic, cards were going up every week, right? Every week, every 2 weeks, every month, and they're taking 7 months to grade the thing. So you send it in, 7 months later, somebody's having a breakout career, and now their cards are worth more. And by the time they get around to grading it, they're going to charge you an upcharge when you sent it in 7 months ago. And like you said, if something happens and the value goes down, you don't get a refund for that. I mean, by the time that you get it back in the mail, it might have gone down in value. So I don't know. None of it seems fair to me.
Well, and that's like when I told the story about the guy who DM'd me on Instagram today asking me if I thought he should grade his Panini Flawless Wembanyama. I said I wouldn't grade it until I was going to sell it, because another reason why you grade it, you pay the upcharge, and then it goes. And then Wembanyama breaks his leg and at the Fanatics games this weekend, and now that card goes from being worth $10,000 to $1,500. Now you've spent $1,000 to grade a card worth $1,500. They're not going to give you your money back, so you better sell it. So I almost like, I don't know. I
give props to PSA though.
Doesn't it disincentivize grading unless you're selling right away? I think
so.
To
me, but I give props to PSA because their new marketing just basically says, grade with us and you'll sell it for more. I mean, they're just targeting the sellers. They're not targeting collectors. No collector wants to pay up to keep a card in their collection for 30 years. You don't want to pay all that money. You're paying to sell it, and their marketing is targeting those people now. They just flat out come out and say it. Grade with us, and you'll get more money. And now they're selling. That's what we should be talking about. How unethical is that? The same authenticator is selling. Like, can you imagine your home inspector is your realtor too? The person who's certifying your house and saying it's in great condition is the same person selling it. Like, that's a conflict of interest, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, because they have well, now what you can do is get your cards graded and then put them in their vault and then list them directly on eBay through their vault. So, right. And I don't know what their commission structure is for themselves, but there is a conflict there. I think there's definitely a perceived conflict, whether that conflict exists or not.
You know what, perceived or not, that is a major conflict. Name some other authenticator that does the selling too. Like, the whole idea of a third party, isn't it called a third party grading?
Yeah.
It's not a first party grading seller. It's right. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something, but you name me one other anything in life where the authenticator is the seller.
Yeah, I don't know.
Where they're incentivized to give you a higher number so they make more money. Name me one other. I don't know of any. I could be missing some.
I don't know.
They're the only ones I know of.
Comes to mind. Nothing comes to mind to me immediately. Let's go to, excuse me. Joe, anything to add?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's annoying, and I don't understand the insurance thing totally myself. But, why do they do it? Because they can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, because I think they do it because they saw people spending $8 to grade their card and the value going from $100 to $2,000, and they felt that they should get a bit of that because
they're not in the value business. They're in the grading business.
I understand.
The value should have nothing to do with it.
But they thought, but they saw all this value that they were awarding to people, and they wanted to take their piece, and this is how they did it. But I understand that I get it. I can see why they would want to do that. What I don't like is the lack of a refund if you still own your card a year later and you haven't sold it and the card came down in value to a different price point. I think they should refund. I think they should have a reserve on their books to repay. But I don't know, that's a mess. There's no way they could ever do that. So
yeah, I had some ancestors, in my ethnicity, right? And they would see somebody making a lot of money. They go knock on the door. Hey, I want a little piece of that. I mean, it's no different.
Yeah. I know it. You're Italian, John. You're Italian. I know what you're talking about. Okay, let's do some quick comments here. Then we'll switch it up, guys. Brett S. said, upcharging is PSA taking their cut of a flip. Yeah, exactly. Clemente Collector. Theo says,
Theo!
PSA upcharge makes no sense. Why are we paying the bill for their mistakes? That's the insurance piece that I mentioned. Jeff McMahon is here. What's up, Jeff? Hobby Champ says, I don't believe that insurance thing at all. What do they have 100 million sitting there just waiting? They very rarely have to dip into that supposed pot. I call BS. Well, I can tell you, they once paid me out from it on a card that I bought that was counterfeit inside a PSA slab, and they paid me out on it. So,
but that's their mistake. It's their mistake. And the insurance company shouldn't even have to pay that. They screwed up.
They're human. They make mistakes, and they're having customers.
But let me tell you, if I burn my own house down, my insurance company ain't going to pay.
That's true.
If you wreck your car into your wife's car, the insurance company ain't going to pay. Good luck.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, it's because it's your fault.
We are not regulated. The insurance is regulated. Insurance is a regulated.
That's what doesn't make sense. The insurance company is going to pay because they screwed up. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, hey, relax. Have a sip. Have a sip, John. Have a sip. Michael Ham says, I don't like that they make a determination of value, especially if that card hasn't sold lately. Yeah, that puts them in a tough predicament. Midlife Greg says, I actually think insurance is built into the price of everything. And Jake from 90s B-Ball Cards has joined us. Jake, good to see you. As always, Thorson says, isn't it funny how all everyone does is whine about PSA, but yet every one of those people continue to send their cards there. If you don't like it, don't grade, cry. He makes a good point.
He can exclude me from that. I haven't sent him a card.
Yeah, it's not everybody, but it is certainly the majority of the hobby. You just have to look at the gem rate numbers to see that.
I agree.
Lucky K says PSA will get their money one way or another. If they charge less for upcharges, they will just charge more for grading. For sure. Bob Boozle, Mangini's passion on this is affecting my blood pressure. Vintage Card Collector says, is PSA the seller on their eBay account any more than auction houses are the seller? Neither owns the cards. There is that break in the conflict discussion there, I would say. Hobby Champ says, I know they do payouts. I'm saying it's not real insurance. They're just paying it and probably claiming it as a loss. Well, it's definitely an expense. If they pay the money out, they're taking the expense for sure. And Colin Murray says, a great lawyer has an upcharge. PSA brings the most money. So they're okay. And Michael Ham says, what does PSA do better than any other grader? Command money on the secondary market. That's about it.
I just want to address that. A lawyer has an upcharge, but you know about it ahead of time, not after you submit, and they don't hold it ransom.
Fair. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you know about it ahead of time. I understand what he's saying. You're going to pay more for PSA because you're going to sell it for more. But when they're holding it for ransom after the fact, that's a different story.
Yeah. Okay. All right, John.
Well, you listen. You wanted some good drama, so there you go. You got me fired up.
I got some good drama out of John.
It's always fun, man.
I didn't ask for drama. I asked for passion. All I asked for was passion. So you definitely brought the passion, John. I knew you would. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. It's good to have you back, and we'll do this again in a few months once you've had a whole bunch of things come through your channel, and I find a bunch of topics I'm interested in that you're also interested in and that you were passionate about. And if drama ensues, drama ensues. So
hey, I appreciate it. I had a good time. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks everybody for the comments.
Keep on dropping your content, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, John. All right, we'll let John go, and we're gonna do the old guest flipperoo now, guys. Here we're 2 hours in, and Lonely Basement says that's drama. There you go, that's drama. Dan says the hobby is lucky that Mangini is in it. He is a great personality in our hobby for sure. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring Ben Hossler's making his monthly appearance on behalf of Rolling Insights channel partner, and we're gonna bring Chris Ho, John. We call him the closer, but we're bringing them both on at the same time tonight. So let's bring on. There you are, Ben. You're on. Welcome back, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing good. Always good to have you on, Ben. You're always fun to have. And let's bring on Chris. You good to go? We're bringing you on, buddy. There he is. Welcome back. How are you?
Doing well. Great to be back.
Good.
Wow, that microphone, that high-level microphone he's got. My God.
Coming in clear? That what we saying?
Yeah.
Nice.
I think I have to upgrade. Is he coming in clearer than me, Joe?
He is. Yeah. He sounds like he's the host. He sounds like he's the host of the show.
Welcome to Sports Cards Live, everybody.
And Ben sounds good too. I think I got to get a new mic. Chris, send me the specs on that one, please.
I will. I sure will.
Yeah. Appreciate it. All right, guys. Well, it's good to have you both here. It's we've come off of 2 hours of John Mangini and Leighton Sheldon, and now we're moving into the final stretch, the final hour of the show. Unless we go into a little bit of overtime, you guys can tell I'm still a little bit sick. I'm coughing. I'm muting myself quite a bit so I can not disturb the flow. But so we'll do a couple things here. First of all, one thing that Ben has done with Rolling Insights and sports-wise is he's updated the list of the first data set that he brought onto the show when he first came on back in, I think, February with some hockey young guns. He's updated it. So, Ben, why don't we start with that? And I'll share the screen. I have it ready to go. And you can just sort of describe what you've done and what your insights were and how did you use Rolling Insights. Again, Rolling Insights is a sponsor of Sports Cards Live, but I think that it brings some interesting topics, and Ben's just always a joy to have on the show. So what do you think, Ben? You want to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. So, I hit wrong one. There we go. So here's the NHL updated stats using Card Ladder and I think Instagram followers as well as just as an indicator of players' overall popularity. So I'm going to, Ben, because you're speaking and I'm going to probably bring some comments on, I'm going to move you up to the top there, me to the bottom, and I'll let you kind of talk us through what you've done here. And guys, once we're done this piece, Ben, I think we'll do this for about 10, 12, maybe 15 minutes. And then you'll stick around till the end of the show and we'll just talk topics. And I'm sure Chris has come with a couple, but there's one from his recent content that I wanted to bring up, which is rarity versus aesthetics. But for now, Ben, the floor is yours.
Yeah, the people are saying that I'm the setup man to Chris Hoge nowadays. So I don't know. We're making a formidable bullpen over here.
Let's do it.
So yeah, like you said, the first time I ever came on this stream, which I mean, I don't think we ever could have thought we could have came this far with some of the stuff we've been doing. So that was quite a bit long ago, like you said, February. So I thought it would be cool to go back and look at, because we had. I don't know much about hockey from a sport level. So that's why I think this is so interesting to look at. It really demonstrates the power of sport-wise, how you can kind of make it say whatever you want. You can play around with it. And this data space that you're looking at, this is available for free on the website. You can go log into your free account. You can access it. You can tweak it, play around with it, whatever you want to do. So basically what I did was we had ranked out, player ranking for some of these younger hockey players, weighting their performance in games. And then we have the Young Gun PSA 10 price. So the MS Young Guns, that's mid-season, which is the last time I came on. So that was looking at their prices of their PSA 10 Young Guns card then. And then I updated it to the most recent sale prices. We have the percentage change from then until now in those card prices. And then, we've talked about Instagram following a couple times when I've come on here. So it's just an interesting kind of variable to look at in terms of the player popularity and the teams that they're on. And I mean, I think you'll notice a 1-for-1 correlation that the most expensive cards are, the highest Instagram follower accounts. So I think we can pretty steadily say there is a pretty large crossover there. But I thought it was interesting to look at the percentage change, of these card prices, because the season's over. So I was just assuming that the majority of the cards would go down because these are new players and the season's over. So I feel like unless people are buying stuff to hold long term, which I guess Connor Bedard would fall into that category. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like card prices would go down when seasons end for these like super ultra modern players. And like I said, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong there, but definitely some interesting stuff to look at, whether it be the, performance in the games correlated to the prices, or even just the price change from the first time we looked at this back in February compared to now.
I don't think you're wrong. I think the season ends, and even when teams are eliminated from the playoffs and can no longer make the playoffs, that there's less interest in some of those players, but that's not a rule across the board, because some players have fan bases and collector bases who are still excited about next season and think maybe the player got injured, the value came down, there's less highlights, less just, interest in them. So people are like, well, the value does come down. Maybe I can start buying them because next season's going to start in 6 months and I could do well on my investments. Because I say investments because a lot of time people are just, these young guns are commodities. They are flipped like no others in the world of hockey. So it's going to work that way. And I'm sure that translates over to the other sports as well. Maybe a different set, a different player. Usually the flagship brand is the one that is mostly transacted on simply because it's the most affordable. And it's also the most printed with the highest PSA populations and the gem rates, which is all an important factor in all of this too. But when I look at this list and I'm sorting by the change in the young gun value between January and basically now, and Mason McTavish, he kind of had a great second half of the season. So I'm not surprised that his young gun went up 37%. Slavkovsky, I'm actually surprised he did pick up in the second half. But what interests me about him is that he plays in Montreal, where they're a very finicky collector base, and every time they get a new rookie, they forget about all the other guys that they ever had. And they just brought up a guy named Ivan Demidov at the very end of the season, who's going to be a mainstay next year. And I think a lot of the money is going to go to him, and they're going to forget about Slavkovsky, just like they did Caulfield and Suzuki. They also have Lane Hudson, who's also on this list. He's down 3%. The guy won the Calder Trophy for best rookie in the league. So I'm surprised it went down, but that could be a function of gem rate populations going up, that kind of thing. There's so many moving factors here. You have to understand the whole landscape, I think, to make sense of it. But this is very interesting data to me, nonetheless. So that's the high end of this. These are the biggest gains. If I resort it by biggest losses, Dylan Genther, I mean, this guy had a great season. He had a really good first half. He didn't slow down that much. I don't think maybe he got hurt a little bit. I don't know for sure. But Wyatt Johnson, he cooled off. Luke Hughes, the whole team cooled off. So I'm not surprised that went down in value. Adam Fantilli was a rookie, and his cards came down in value because he maybe didn't perform to the extent that people wanted him to. Now, listen, if you're not a hockey fan and you're listening to this or watching this, these same things, these same principles, I believe, can be applied to basketball, football, and baseball as well within their seasons and how they fall into the calendar. And then there's Connor Bedard, down 9%. I knew that this card was going to tank from the day it came out, and it has. I mean, it's funny, Ben, that, in January it was at 550. Well, in September it was at 1100. So this card has tanked, and the fact it only fell 10% between January and June, I think, is a huge win for the card. I think this is a great number. This could have been a lot bigger in my mind, but Bedard is not a bust. He's a great player, and I think we'll see. I hope we see good things from him in the Blackhawks next year. So it's interesting. I really like the IG count piece. Again, it's not directly correlated to anything except popularity on social media. And there's some guys that aren't even on social media. There's some that are more active. So it's just interesting to see. I think it does have a place in the discussion. So I like that. Yeah, and actually games played is interesting. When I mentioned that maybe Genther was hurt, he played 70 games. So he missed 12 games in the season. So not too bad. Not too bad. What did Bedard play? He played all 82. All these guys down here played all 82 games, including Lane Hudson, the rookie of the year. So it's interesting stuff. And then the question to me becomes, Ben, is how can people who are really transacting in the hobby, treating these as commodities, how can they use the Sportwise platform on Rolling Insights to gain an advantage? And I don't necessarily know the answer to that, Ben, but I think the more data you have, and Chris Hoge is a data guy. Chris, I wouldn't be surprised if Chris was bleeding and a data stream came out of the cut versus blood, okay? Like, he's a data guy. So actually, I'm not going to ask you this, Ben. I'm going to ask Chris. Chris, how do you think a platform like this can help people who are transacting a lot in the hobby?
Well, I think it certainly caters to the higher-minded analytical collector who is going to want to go beyond the Sports Center highlight clips, who's going to want to go beyond the viral social media post or tweet or the TikTok video that's highlighting a certain player. They want to, as our friend Victor says, cut through the fluff and get to the actual substance here and figure out if there is a statistical and performative backing to the hype. And that's exactly my sweet spot. So without a tool like this available to me for years, I've still used the full repertoire of statistics when I evaluate players, especially active players, but also retired ones too. And I lean into those heavily, and I make it my business to understand how they work and what they're measuring and what their shortcomings are and what their positives are. And so I just think a tool like this is it's a tool that completely unlocks a collector's potential in terms of how they can synthesize empirical information to assess pricing inequities, to assess player-to-player comparisons. Now, something that Ben's doing that I don't do, but that I maybe should do a little more of, it might be a blind spot for me, is he's bringing in the social media followers. And that is a really cool metric. I agree. I think it's really neat to sort of try and get as close as we can to figuring out elements of a celebrities, which is what these guys are in addition to athletes, their Q score. I think he's built out a way to kind of try to get to all these different metrics on ice performance, but also popularity and reach and cultural impact and all these things. I mean, these are all variables in the function that we use as collectors when we try to figure out what we want to pay for something and or whether we want to pay for something at all in the first place. And the more I think we can flesh out that process and turn it into something more and more precise, the better. I'm always striving to do that. So I don't know. It's probably no surprise that this sort of analysis is right up my alley.
It's not to me, Chris. And you mentioned the Instagram followers. You should recall that him adding this came out of this show. We talked about it and he added it. Now, you also mentioned, why you like it. And it speaks to, you probably remember I put a story post out on Instagram the other day about hobby love. And, it's the only metric that matters. Other ones do, of course, too. But like it's, you can't really measure it. And this is one way to, and it's not hobby love. Instagram followers is not hobby love, but it is representative of a person's popularity in society and culture. And it might be one clue or hint towards hobby love, which I really have trouble, excuse me, defining and quantifying at all. So I like what you said. I think that makes a lot of sense. Makes sense to me for sure. And then I want to go to a comment here, the foul ball. He says, advantage for what? Flipping? Well, yeah, I think that's exactly it. Well, that's part of it, foul ball. Data can give you an advantage. For better or for worse, there are people in this hobby who know nothing about sports. They don't watch sports. They just buy and sell cards to make money. And right or wrong, love them or hate them, it's just a part of the landscape of our hobby right now. And people like that, they're looking for an edge. They're looking for an edge so that they can beat the system. And this is the kind of data that they could use if they know nothing other than data and they don't understand, let's say, the hobby love or a player's appeal outside of what you see on the stats or the game summaries every day. That's something that those sorts of people can see. But not only flipping, but also long-term holding. And by, well, let's say longer term holding, up to say 1 year. Because if you can look at this and find a weakness where everything looks good, but the card price is low, like good offensive statistics, maybe a lowish PSA 10 population, maybe a high Instagram follower count, and maybe the cards come down in value recently, maybe the games played tell you that they were injured, you might see an opportunity to go buy some of that player's cards to then sell / flip, to foul balls vernacular, in a year or later on, you know? So this really ties into timing. And listen, we don't talk about this kind of stuff a lot here on Sports Cards Live, but it is a part of the hobby. And so here we are getting into it. Ben, does that all make sense, resonate with you? Anything you'd like to mention on that?
Yeah, I appreciate the words from, you and Chris. I think you guys stated it pretty well. I just want to like clear it up, foul ball. If you haven't watched when I've been on here before, I want this to be known that I am new to the sports card space, and B, not coming into this with a distinct even plan of exactly this is good for flipping, this is good for long-term hoarding. I'm not here to give you advice on any cards. I am an unbiased source. My background is fantasy sports, and I love to analyze players. And I think that there could be a correlation between, ranking predictive analytics when it comes to their performance in games and potentially their card prices. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Like I said, that's why I think this tool is so good, because I don't know. I don't play fantasy hockey. I don't know anything about hockey, but I can rank out their performances in games and at least make accurate judgments based off that. So, whether people would, if you think you could look at that for a short-term gain, maybe. I'm confident in my ability to analyze players, especially when it comes to other sports that I've talked about previously on streams or that I'll talk about on future streams. So I'm confident I could identify players that are going to outperform their expectations in football or basketball, whatever it may be. And we're improving it every time I come on here. I think we've made, good progress in that. I've even played with, I'm not ready to debut it, Jeremy, but I think when we get to the college football segment that's coming in one of my future streams, I've played with attempting to add social media following into a stat along with the actual performance stats, and trying to figure out, is there a way that we can accurately weigh that along with the stats that they've put in on the field. So that's something that I've worked on that, we can, I'm going to continue working on that in the background, and maybe we can take a look at in the future. But yeah.
I love that that has been added as a function of coming on with us, and you getting, really just becoming a part of and being open to the sports card collector, connoisseur, enthusiasts, the way that we look at this. One other thing I think you could add to this, because you are looking at PSA 10 pricing, I think you could also add population, and there should be some sort of a Chris, what's it called when you take like two metrics and meld them together? There's a name for that.
You're looking for a market cap here, the population times the grade.
I'm not. Your market cap might be a part of the overall calculation. That's not what I was. A factor, I think. I was looking for the word where you take the PSA 10 population and you take the price of the card, and then you weight each of them somehow and come up with a new measure, and maybe market cap, which is those two multiplied by each other.
But you're adding something. Maybe you're thinking of an index.
An index of something like that, yeah, where you can have another measure that just factors in the PSA 10 population, because Ben, there's no doubt about it, that has an impact on the price. So market cap is maybe the number that you use to work in with the price of the card. So Chris, I think what I was getting at was like, take the PSA 10 price, take the market cap, and come up with a ratio. A ratio is maybe what I was thinking. Come up with a ratio and rank them that way. And I don't know what the weightings need to be if one's weighted heavier than the other. But Chris, you're nodding along. Does that kind of make sense?
It completely makes sense, because there are, and you're right to sort of want to blend the two statistics rather than simply go with one or the other. Although I have never heard of anybody doing that before, but once you've said it, I completely agree, because on some level, like just imagine that we were at Fanatics Fest today, the four of us sort of walking that floor, and we saw these different Young Guns PSA 10s, and they have stickers on them. We're not able to immediately know in our minds what's the population and what's the market cap, but we can sort of intuitively say, well, the Bedard is $500, and the Hudson is almost $500, and just dollar for dollar, does that intuitively make sense or not? And we can start it. We can't help but assess that, but that's only half of the story. That's the price. The other part of the story that matters is, well, how many are there? Because if there's only 100 Bedards, I'm just completely making these numbers up, but if there's only 100 Bedards and there's 1,000 Hudsons, then each of them being worth $500 means something much different in the context of supply and demand. In the context of supply and demand, it's going to be much easier to walk to the next booth and see one of the cards that has 1,000 PSA 10s. It's going to be much less likely that we're going to see one that has one of the 100 PSA 10s. So that's where the market cap analysis factors in. So if there was a way to blend those so that we can take account for the fact that maybe some have much larger market caps than others, but also on a basic level, if we're just thinking about making a trade or thinking about making a purchase, looking at a dollar for dollar price sticker approach, also it still wouldn't, it would strike us as very weird too if a player who's far worse than a different player was priced much more simply because their population was much lower. So there has to be a way to balance those, Jeremy. I think you're right.
Yeah, maybe it's some sort of ratio and just got to get those weightings proper. But yeah, it's interesting. And I think and I also mentioned to you, Ben, if you do decide to add that in somehow, that getting the populations on these is a lot easier to do straight from Card Ladder than it is from the PSA website. You go to Card Ladder through the sales history, punch in any card, and there's a nice link to pop, and it's just more, to me, it's easier than going through the PSA population report itself. MVP Collectors, Hoj is in his element right now, and we have two calls. HB says Joe P for Hobby President. Rip and List echoes it. Joe P for Hobby Prez. Now, John Mangini, who just left us, is the Hobby President right now. Whether that's a permanent appointment, I don't know. I don't know when his term is up. But here on Sports Cards Live, we are not campaigning for Joe to become Hobby President. We would not do that to the current incumbent. However, the term Hobby Pope has been thrown around for Joe P in the past. So let us know what you think about that. Okay. Joe, did you have anything to jump in with basically on Hobby Presidential status versus Hobby Pope status, or what we're talking about here with Ben?
Not on the presidential Pope situation, but one thing that I like to include in my own very statistically flawed, because it's all just in my brain, reckoning of player values, is also the awards they might win in any given season. And so it occurs to me, since you did this for a complete season, and now that these players, and I don't know hockey well enough, but at least in the NBA, there's an all rookie team. In fact, there's an all first team, second team, and third team, if I recall correctly, for the NBA. And so that might be yet another way to sort of fine tune the perceived value from a different source. Quite typically, writers, they're subjective in their own way of evaluating, but sometimes there are aspects of subjective analysis that are important. And so I wonder if that could be another, again, you're in a tough spot, Ben, because it's like you want the data to be true and not sort of influenced by human factor. But I'm also getting, back to presidential talk, checks and balances can be important. And I do think that we sometimes let stats overdrive our analysis. And so, something that might take into account, say, in this particular group of players would be, where did they, maybe it's a point this, point that multiplier for first team, second team, third team, all rookie. And JD, do they do all rookies in hockey? I mean,
I think so. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do first team all-star, second team all-star. They do the rookie team. Yeah. And people just kind of laugh at it. They don't really give it much, put much value to it, but they do it. And they've been doing it for as long as I can remember. Speaking of the hobby love aspect, these intangibles, these subjective sort of things, Yelia Williams says, finding a way to analyze how price is affected by hobby love or other non-performance factors with data would be an interesting pursuit. And that's it's exactly what we're talking about. I agree with Yelia Williams. And that's why Ben added Instagram follower count to the analysis to try to work that in. No one else is doing that. No one else is doing that. There's an opportunity for Rolling Insights, Ben, on the SportsWise platform to take the lead in that. I think there really is there. Baseball Card Curmudgeon says price to population or market cap to price, like price to earnings ratio. Yeah, exactly, Curmudgeon. That's what the exact calculation is, what that ratio is exactly. I need to put more thought into it when I'm not sitting here running a live stream. But yeah, I think that there's definitely something to it. Exactly. So yeah. Ben, any further thoughts?
Oh, it's a good discussion as always. Like, that's why I love coming on here. Not only does this, help me because I'm using the tools and creating, new things, but I love to get your guys' feedback. I love to get the chat's feedback because this is uncharted territory for me. So it's always good discussion, gives me stuff that, I can add into these for future appearances. I just want to remind the chat, of course, that we are debuting a new feature on SportWise, which is like the AI coach. So an AI coach in the data space, so you can ask it any questions you want. And that's not really available yet, but if you want early access to that, you can just reach out to me and we can hook you guys up with that. And we have a free Discord as well. So if you guys want to talk sports cards, it's right on the bottom of the website. You can hop in there and ask me anything you want in there as well.
Appreciate you offering that to the Sports Cards Live chat. Ben, Double D Dylan says, I'm all for people diving so deep into this, but it all sounds like rocket science, and I have done just fine collecting from my gut and passion. Am I alone on this? You're certainly not alone, Dylan, but that's not the way everybody does it in my experience. Now, I'm more like Dylan. I go by my gut. I mean, even when I buy a card, I don't, and Foul Ball says, I agree. I comp using my brain. And it's not necessarily my brain, it's my gut, which is also, I think people are, I think there's an argument out there, even scientifically, that your gut is your second brain and maybe more powerful than your main brain at times. In any event, I go with my gut too. Sometimes I don't want to look at comps when I buy a card because I don't want that comp to impact or bias me on what I want to pay for the card. So I just bid, and if I'm way off, I pay too much, I deal with it. But as I've said before, it's only really ever worked out for me. So I trust my gut, but not everybody has like you and me, Dylan, do decades of experience in the hobby to be able to trust their guts, right? And I think that goes think about how many people came into this hobby in the last 5 years at the pandemic who are now trying to get an edge, get an angle, make some money, flip cards, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, appreciate we're on the same page there. Dylan says, you nailed my thoughts, Jeremy. I'm glad I did, buddy. I'm glad I did. And Dylan, I know you're going to be joining Joe on Monday night with Greg on Midlife, and that's great. I can't wait to watch it. But Dylan, I want to, Joe and I have talked. We're going to get you on here too. So I just need to know how to get a hold of you, Dylan. But maybe Joe can help me with that. Maybe he knows how to already. So, okay. Bob Boozler says, I trust my wife's gut. Don't get me started. Bob with another legendary comment right there. Okay, Ben, are we good? Or anything else you want to mention or talk about in terms of this particular data set here?
I think I'm good on this one. Like I said, for the future appearances, we're going to try and correlate what we talk about with what's relevant. So like I said, college football will be coming when that's starting up. We have NFL coming back as well towards the end of the summer. So definitely some stuff to work towards, and, some notes from you guys in the chat that, hopefully I can add in for the next time as well.
Right on. So the plan is to continue to have Ben on, come on once a month. We do this show just about every Saturday unless I'm traveling. So we won't be doing a show during the national, but otherwise, and even if I am traveling, we'll sometimes do it if I'm not like out and about. So we'll do college football, we'll do NFL before these things happen. So looking forward to those Foul Ball says there are too many flippers already in the hobby. We don't need more. But Ziggy No says flippers are hobbyists too. And like I say, flippers, they have an impact on prices, I believe, but they also serve a purpose. They bring cards. Look at what the one guy did today. I saw at Fanatics Fest. He bought a card for $250,000 somewhere and sold it today in New York City to the owner of the Washington Commanders for $500,000. So he provided a service to the owner of the Washington Commanders by bringing the card to him and being able to make that sale. So, I mean, flippers and breakers certainly have their places in the hobby ecosystem. And that's all. We're not getting into that anymore right now. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing that with us, Ben. I just love how open-minded you are to all this stuff as well, especially taking our suggestions and incorporating them into the data set. So why don't we move on now to another topic? And Chris, if you came with something that you're passionate about, you really want to talk about, we can do that, or we can continue the discussion about rarity versus aesthetics and what's more important.
Let's continue that discussion. But I'm very excited about what I brought today, because this might be one of the only times in Sports Cards Live history that I will bring a hockey topic.
Ooh.
But I brought one, and it actually, I think, dovetails pretty nicely with what the data space that we were just looking at, in the sense that there's a lot of talk about like how can flippers use this to make short-term money. But there, to me, I'm a collector. I'm not a flipper. And I still find an incredible amount of utility from a data space like that, because I'm not trying to figure out who's going to be undervalued 3 months from now. I'm trying to figure out which one of these guys might be one of the greatest players of all time. And then in terms of measuring which players are the greatest players of all time, I've come up with a metric that I think works okay in the different sports of basketball, football, and now I've done it for hockey. It's a little bit trickier for baseball for reasons that will probably become obvious once people hear what the metric is, and definitely for soccer too, but I think it works pretty well for those three. And the metric is total MVPs. Total MVPs. So I've done this for NBA, I've done this for NFL. I did it for the NHL. And the way that the total MVPs metric works is I simply take the number of MVPs that each player has won in terms of the regular season, the Hart Memorial Trophy, and the total number of MVPs, of playoff MVPs that they've won, which is the Conn Smythe Trophy. And I just add them together. It's really as simple as that. Now, NHL regular season MVPs go back to the 1923-24 season, and the Conn Smythe goes back to the 1964-65 season. So there's a 40-year period where there wasn't a playoff MVP being awarded. But so bear that in mind. But anyway, I want to give you guys the results of this study, and then I want to get some reactions on how accurate you think total MVPs is as a proxy for who the greatest NHL players of all time are. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so it's on the screen, and I'll read it for the audience. Wayne Gretzky has the most total MVPs with 11. Gordie Howe is next with 6. Mario Lemieux has 5, and he's tied with Bobby Orr, who also has 5. Then with 4, we have another tie. Connor McDavid has 4, Ovechkin has 4, Crosby has 4, and Eddie Shore has 4. I'm just going to stop there. All right, I'm just going to stop there. So I believe that's 9 players that just got mentioned. There are 9 players with 4 or more total MVPs, and there are just 21 players with 2 or more total MVPs. Just 21 players who have more than one total MVP in NHL history, and then the 9 with 4 or more, and then the great one at the top with 11, and almost doubling everybody else, lapping the field. Okay, so I've presented this statistic, and then looking at kind of what Ben's doing, like I'm looking at that, and I'm saying which one of these guys could potentially get on this list? Which one of these rookies could Bedard eventually be a guy who has multiple total MVPs? And if he does, all of a sudden, in my estimation, he gains a lot of historical prominence. So that's me tying things back together. But I want to get the reaction here from everybody on how does this list resonate with you?
Well, I'll take the first shot as a guy who knows who all these players are. And I saw this list, Chris, earlier today, and I stopped it and I paused on it and I thought about it. And It's a good list. Let me start by saying that. This is a good list. There are no people on this list that shouldn't be there. I think that's obvious. They've won MVPs. I'm glad that you don't have like there are players, even this year in the Stanley Cup Finals, Sam Bennett won the Conn Smythe Trophy for most valuable player in the playoffs. He's never won a Hart Trophy for MVP for the season. He never will. He'll probably he could win the Conn Smythe again next year. Hobby love values, there's nothing there. Like there's very few people that care. First of all, he was a Calgary Flame when he came into the league. We drafted him 4th overall. I loved him. He was one of my favorite players on the team. He's a game changer. We let him go too early and we didn't get enough for him. And I was disappointed and I cheer for him. I love him as a player. And I know a lot of people don't because he can be a little bit dirty at times. A great hockey player. He's the kind of guy you want on your team. He's going to get a huge pay raise this year as well. Okay. But he's not going to end up on this list. Like he's not, especially at the top. He could be at the 2 mark, but that is not going to translate into hobby value. It just isn't. And he plays in a small market, a non-traditional small market in Florida, the new capital of hockey, because they've been to the Stanley Cup Finals between them and the Lightning in each of the last 6 years, winning 4 cups. So you go down the list: Gretzky, Howe, Lemieux, or McDavid, Ovechkin, Crosby. 7 players. Those are all-time greats. Those are all-time GOAT greats. Then you get to Eddie Shore. The problem with Eddie Shore, where he is that he only ever played when there were 6 teams in the league, if that. So it's a different game. It's a different era, but you're not going to omit him from the list, Chris, because he's on the list. But he is one of the most important rookie cards of the pre-war era in hockey. I actually consider him to be a top 4 rookie card pre-war. So there's that, but he's, today he's not up there with George Vezina. He's up there, but he's not up there with, like, at the top. So, well, the top 4, I guess he is. But when you put him in the overall list, people aren't out there pursuing his cards like they are other people on this list. So he's a bit of an outlier where he falls. And then you have Bobby Clark, maybe outshooting his hobby love rank. Guy Lafleur is up there. Marc Messier, Patrick Waugh, Jean Beliveau. Howie Morin, similar to Eddie Shore, hasn't played since the 1920s, probably maybe the 30s. And then Hasek should be there. Sakic should be there. Perau and Makita, they played in the 60s and 70s. Esposito, same thing. Nell Stewart is a pre-war guy, and Patrick Kane is modern. So it's a really good list. I think it's an important list. But there's a couple other things. The Hart Trophy. I want to attack the Hart Trophy a little bit. The Hart Trophy is voted on by the press, by the journalists. There's bias, a lot of Eastern bias, right? Meanwhile, the Ted Lindsay Trophy is voted on by the players, and it gets no attention. You didn't even pick up on it, Chris. But the MVP each year is voted on by the players is called the Ted Lindsay Trophy. To me, that carries way more weight than the Art Ross Trophy or than the Hart Trophy does, similar to the way I Appeal carries more weight than Technical Grade does to me. That just popped into my mind. So I think, Chris, you could expand this by adding the Ted Lindsay Trophy. Then you'd see Kucherov on this list. I saw in the chat, More Hockey Cards Please says someone obvious from that list missing is Jaromir Jagr. He doesn't have more MVPs. Well, the reason for that is because he always played with Mario Lemieux, or he played at the same time as other players who were winning them when the cluster at the top was very big and tight. There were lots of great players at the time. He played with he played at the same time as Wayne Gretzky. He played at the same time as Mario Lemieux. He played at the same time as even, I think, Sidney Crosby for a little bit. So it's tough. Like it's Sundin 564 agrees with me. He says Hart Trophy is fake news. So really, Chris, you have to think that Hart Trophies are subjective. They are filled with bias. So That's why I like the Lindsay Trophy better. I'd be curious, Chris, to see the Lindsay Trophy report, even the Conn Smythe. I mean, that the people who decide on the Conn Smythe, they have like 10 minutes to make that decision. You know, like they're thinking about it in the final round, but then they literally award it 5 minutes after the game is over. 5 minutes after the playoffs are over, the Conn Smythe Trophy is awarded to the winner. So how reliable is it, right? I don't know how it works in basketball, but I know you love these metrics as a way to assign importance to players, perhaps. I just don't think it's a complete picture. All that said, this is a great list, but there are some notable omissions like Yager, like Kucherov in Tampa Bay, who's, you know, great. Draisaitl, who in many nights is better than McDavid, et cetera, et cetera. So those are my immediate responses to this list. Before you respond or we hear from Joe and Ben to pipe in as well, a couple of quick comments here. Yelia Williams says player voted awards can be tricky too. Just ask Halliburton. More hockey cards, please. Says retired numbers would be a good metric. Who's had their number retired? Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know how you layer that in. Personally, I'm just thinking it through. More hockey cards, please. I'm not saying I disagree, but I think, Chris, you're on to something. This list itself is a great list. It's a great list. I'm glad you made it. I loved seeing it today. I think that this list could be improved as being indicative as to important players in the hobby. Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely love those thoughts. And I've already tasked ChatGPT with a deep research prompt to gather all the Ted Lindsay Award winners. Apparently that goes back to 1970-71. So we're gonna grab all those and we'll see what comes out on the other side. I thought those were amazing insights, and then I'll just put a bow on it from my point of view by saying that I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a correlation here with hobby values, but that can be an amazing opportunity for an upstart NHL collector, for somebody who wants to collect in the lane of NHL and they want the pride of, I collect one of the players who's accumulated the most MVP awards of any, and I can look at a list like this anytime I want, and I can see them up there at the top of it, and their cards are dirt cheap. And, you know, that could lead me down a rabbit hole of discovering a player and coming to appreciate them and having a great hobby experience by being able to collect them at a very cheap level. That's almost like one of the main hobby hacks that I find from taking a truly objective look that completely removes my subjective bias. And I reset as a student and I say, okay, taking this list at face value, who are some players here that I could maybe start developing an appreciation for that I didn't already have, especially guys who I could get amazing cards of at a low price. So like that's one angle or way to use this, but I certainly don't advocate for it. It's a way that I would do it, but this is more of a sports topic than a hobby topic. And the thing that I like about about this approach, and I'm certainly not trying to say that it answers the question of who the best hockey players are, because it clearly doesn't. I think you made a lot of great points as to point out some of the weaknesses in it. Chief among them, perhaps, just being the subjectivity and the bias that exists in voting, which is in all the sports, but certainly I could see how it is in NHL for the reasons you gave too. But the thing that I like about a list like this is that the list is exactly what it says it is, and it's nothing more and it's nothing less. This list is not saying these are the best players. This list is not saying these are the greatest goal scorers. This list is not saying that this is the greatest players. This list is simply saying if you add up how many Hart and Conn Smythe trophies every player won, this is the result. That's all that it's saying. It's not saying anything more. It's not saying anything less. And I really like when I know exactly what a number is telling me, because there's a lot of numbers in sports that I don't completely know what it's telling me, or it's obscuring something, or it's smuggling in other information. This number is just telling me exactly what it's telling me, and it's very easy to process. Even the most casual hockey fan like myself, I can understand what it's saying.
Yeah. You said it's not a hobby list. It's more of just a sport discussion. That makes complete sense to me. And I know that these lists are often used when you talk about, the Jordan versus LeBron discussion, or Kobe, who's the greatest of all time, the GOAT discussions. This clearly puts Gretzky at the top of that list. But one of those things, people might say if Bobby Orr had a full career, he could be tied with Gretzky up there at 11 or even higher, but he got hurt. There's so many things like that do come into play with it. But it is, like you said, it tells you what it is. Couple quick comments from the chat, then we'll hear from Joe and Ben. Ron Perry said Yager won 3 Lindsays. Well, that right there, puts him in the discussion. It puts him in the top half of this list, or at least average in the middle, square in the middle of the list. Terry Fortune says Rocket, which he's referring to Maurice Richard and Steve Yzerman, only have 1 each, but belong on any list of NHL greats. He's 100% correct about that. So yeah, it's not the end all be all of greatness, but it certainly is a starting point. Joe, what goes through your mind when we have this discussion and you think about this, even as it relates to other sports?
I like it. I like it a lot. And I like its simplicity. Hoj and I have had this conversation before. And there's been some, it's been in the news lately, like, is ring culture, taking over, the sports talk, and then, maybe vis-a-vis the hobby talk. And I don't know, I've been won over by Hoj's sort of really focusing on greatness, but for whatever reason, I still, it's like I want to be able to account for someone like a Charles Barkley, for instance, who had a great career, but even Barkley himself came out recently and was just sort of saying, we understand we don't get a seat at the table when we're talking about this kind of stuff, because if you don't have rings, you don't really get a seat at that table. And this, the bias, I mean, every metric rubric is going to have, strengths, weaknesses, whatever that you can pick at. I think this one, for its simplicity, has a lot going for it, and it lines up in other sports at least. And from what I know of hockey, it seems to line up pretty well, with Gretzky so far ahead of everyone. That's kind of how I understand Gretzky's impact historically on the NHL. So that aligns. But the bias I would, I guess, point out in this is that, a finals MVP, like I would weight the regular season MVP a little bit more than the finals MVP. And that's just my own sensibility. And again, that could be something you could incorporate into your own personal list. But that's, I guess, what goes through my mind is, are we overvaluing ring culture just a little bit?
And that's because these are team sports, I think, is why you're saying you would value the regular season over the playoffs. Now, of course, the whole point is to win championships, but you can be a great team. You can be a great player on a team that doesn't even make the playoffs. You can be better than any player that wins the championship and not make the playoffs. So I think I agree with you, Joe. That said, when it comes down to posterity and legacy, winning, raising that trophy. There's gonna be a lot more pictures of someone raising that trophy than there's gonna be someone who won the MVP for the regular season and didn't make the playoffs. So
and when I've had this argument with Hoj, I mean, like he points that out, and I don't really have a response. Like, it's like, you're right. I still argue, but I don't really have like
I agreed with you, and then I kind of went back on a little bit, but I do agree with you. Like, there's no perfect way to do this. So Ben, let's hear. I mean, you've been listening. What thoughts do you have on this discussion?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I think where my brain goes when we're talking about other sports, whether it be basketball or football, I'm curious, maybe 10 or 15 years from now, like, what will that list look like when we think of how the media covers sports? Is there media fatigue? Like, is there MVP fatigue? I think, which can fit into the ring culture talk. But I mean, if we think about Nikola Jokic, if we think about Lamar Jackson, both are coming off multiple MVP seasons and then had arguably their best statistical season that they've had in their career and did not win the MVP because they had just won prior multiple MVPs. So I'm wondering, like, 10 or 15 years down the line, like, how high up can some of these modern players get in relation to those past players that have these high number correlated MVPs? And, will that place an even greater emphasis on these past players in terms of where they're regarded historically as, the greatest of all time?
And then, you have to, I agree. And you have to layer in, I believe you have to layer in, I'm just going to put that graphic back on the screen, the amount of the level and amount of competition that there is in the era. Because even if you go back to guys like Bobby Clark and Guy Lafleur, I mean, they played in a 21 team league. The NHL is up to 32 teams now. So there was less competition. There were more eyeballs on them, per capita or percentage wise, I guess, than otherwise. Same with Stan Mikita and Phil Esposito. And then you got Nell Stewart down here. None of you have even heard of him. But there's guys running hockey card podcasts that have never heard of Nell Stewart, right? Because look, he played most recent MVP was in 1930. So, I only know of him because of hockey cards and because he's in the Hall of Fame. If I didn't collect the Hall of Fame set registry at one point in my collecting career, I wouldn't even really know who this guy was. People aren't talking about him, even up in Canada. So, yeah, I like Ben's comment. I'd like to see how this works out 10 years from now, where there's more teams in, I think, every sport. It's going to be harder to win. So you may never, if other sports have a guy like Gretzky who is double the next guy or really close to it, no one's ever going to catch him because of parity in all of these leagues. And we're seeing it in basketball this year. Look who's in the finals, right? So those are some of my comments on that. Frankie says ring culture is different in every sport. Baseball versus basketball is a great example on that. Bob Boozle wants to know how many plumbers on that list. Yeah, and Foul Ball says you can't predict the future. No, but he didn't say to predict the foul ball. He said, I look forward to seeing what happens with that. And Dan's Vintage says there was MVP fatigue in the 1940s and 50s with Musial and Mantle getting robbed after already winning a couple. So yeah, that's a bias. That's right. They're not giving them to him because, hey, you've had your share. Let's give them to someone else this time.
That was institutionalized in baseball, even once the rules shifted to allow a player to win multiple MVPs. But during the bulk of Babe Ruth's career, it was actually the rule that a player could only win one MVP and that it needed to go to other players. So baseball is really tricky.
Really tricky there. Yeah. Then it would be great if you had the player voted award, right? I trust the player voted award much more than I do the media award, where 90% of media, this is a guess, I might be wrong, it might be lower now, but let me continue. 90% of people with votes for the Hart Trophy have never professionally played the game of hockey. So they don't really know as well what it takes to be a great player, to be the greatest player in the league. They're not playing against these guys. They're not seeing the little things, right? They're watching from way, way up. Bob Boozle says, news alert, Jeremy Lee continues attacks on media. Well, I mean, listen, I think I always found it interesting and not optimal that they are the ones who vote on some of these awards. Some, like the Art Ross, is given the player with the most points. It is what it is, right? You just know most points in a season. It's very it's set, it's fixed, it can't change. You cannot argue. There's no subjectivity. It's set in stone. So all right, anything else anybody wants to mention on that topic? Good. Okay. Well, let's jump into rarity versus aesthetics. Chris, we got about 10 more minutes here. Let's talk about rarity versus aesthetics for about 10 minutes, guys. And Chris, I did get this topic from, it might have come out of the Chris Hoge podcast, actually. But I love the topic. I absolutely love the discussion. Why don't you set the table for us?
Yeah, I'll try to set it a lot more simply than I did in the episode. But basically the idea is, as a collector, how much, when I'm evaluating a card and considering adding it to my collection, how much of my decision calculus is skewing towards how beautiful it is and how much I enjoy its quality in hand, and how much of the decision is skewing towards just how rare it is. And rare is a difficult topic, by the way, because rare is not just as simple as saying, well, this has one copy, or this is a pop one, and this has 500 copies, and so therefore one is rarer than the other. That's not necessarily the case. Rarity is conceptual as well as a fact that can exist in the world. So to make it really crystal clear with an example, suppose a product was released that had its entire product was 1,000 one-of-one parallels to every base set card. 1,000. Okay. So you have a one-of-one, and it's the only one, but it really belongs to a family of 1,000. Are each of those 1,000 one-of-ones truly rarer than a different card that, let's say, it has 100 copies, and all those 100 copies are identical, except for the fact that they're numbered. One's 1 of 100, 2 of 100, etc. Is one of the one-of-ones belonging to the group of 1,000? Is that truly rarer than one of the cards belonging to the family of 100? So I just don't want to take the idea of rarity for granted. I also don't want to settle the rarity debate here and now. I think it's an open question, but just know that when I say rarity versus aesthetics, I don't just mean what's the number on the card. Rarity is conceptual. Rarity is about how you cluster things and what the family of things that they belong to are. There's a lot more that goes into rarity than just what's the number on the card or what's the population number or what's the print run. But anyway, that's the question, Jeremy, is sort of as a collector for yourself, as you're evaluating a card to add to your collection, how much do you lean into how beautiful it is? How much do you lean into how rare it is? And then how do those two balance each other? Like, if a card is really, really, really rare, can it be ugly and that's okay? Or if a card is really, really, really beautiful, can it be common and that's okay?
It's a great topic. I love it. I think first thing I'll say is that for me, I collect from 1888 to 2025. And I think I approach these factors in my decisions differently for a modern card versus a vintage card. I think we don't have one-of-ones in the old days in the world of vintage. I'm not a PSA 10 pop one is not a one-of-one to me. It's just the card that got lucky enough to end up in that PSA 10 slab. And there could be thousands and thousands of copies. So I think you look at it differently, but at the simple level here, your 1,000 one-of-ones, Leaf products come to mind where they will make the same card, put a different color foil on it, and there's the 1-of-1, there's the out of 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 50 probably, with maybe a few that are missed in between, skip numbered, if you will. And some people say, listen, it's the 1-of-1, but it looks the same as the 1 out of 20. There's really, if you add up all the print runs, there's actually 100 copies. Are you going to pay a premium for the 1-of-1 copy because it simply says 1-of-1 and has a different color foil on it? Well, people do. That they found that hack to add value to their, and they only did it to add value so that they weren't, so that they could do it. They could add rarity to their production. And I think it is rarer because it is a 1-of-1. Simply by the virtue of stamping 1-of-1 on the card, it has become rarer. But, and again, we're not going to get that, your example is extreme, but it makes a great point. I like to look at it in the world of vintage, because that's really where my heart is right now. I like my modern stuff too, but when it comes to vintage, it's aesthetics. It's like player first, and then it's aesthetics. It's aesthetics, and then is it rarity? I mean, listen, a card on high on my want list right now is a 1933 Gaudi Lou Gehrig. I can go on eBay, Fanatics Collect, wherever, and I got my choice of dozens any day of the week. But what's rare is the right copy for me. And that's where rarity comes into play. I have to find the right copy for me. And that's why I don't have one yet. I got my choice of many, but I'm waiting for the right copy. So rarity and aesthetics, I'm battling both, because to me, aesthetics make the eye appeal makes the card rare in vintage. So we're up against two opposing forces as vintage collectors who want a beautiful copy of the card. Modern wise, for me, I like the rarity now. I want to, but it's beauty too. Chris, I don't think there's any case where I will add a card I think is ugly to my collection, even if it's a 1-of-1. Like, I don't care. Be as rare as you want. There's so many cards out there to buy that I can wait for a beautiful 1-of-1 instead of buying an ugly 1-of-1. So no, to me, it's aesthetics over rarity. Yeah, aesthetics over rarity. And in modern vintage, it's a tougher discussion. Okay, I'll stop now. Let's unless you want to retort right away, Chris, we can go right to Joe.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, actually, Jaylee, I line up pretty much with what you said. I mean, I think when it, comes to vintage, it's a bit of a different conversation, but I do also collect ultra modern, and I've definitely trended towards rarity in ultra modern, with the caveat that I have to still appreciate the card. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know, does desirability, like it occurs to me that in the vintage world, like there are some 50s rookie cards, let's just say Ernie Banks, since I saw it mentioned in the chat. I'd imagine there's quite a few out there, and maybe not the exact Ernie Banks that will suit your eye appeal standards, but there are, I have to guess, hundreds and hundreds of 1954 tops Ernie Banks. But you also have a lot of Ernie Banks collectors. You have a lot of people that want to own an Ernie Banks. So I guess I would throw a third variable into this is, how many other people want that card, because that's going to influence rarity, or maybe that's already cooked into what we understand as rarity. But I would like it more explicitly factored in, the desirability of a particular issue to the larger collecting base.
The demand for the card I think the demand is like condition. It factors in to both rarity. The more demand, the rarer, not rarer, scarcer the card will be. Rarity is just how many there are, but scarce is demand and population sort of combined, not grading pop, I mean print run pop. So yeah, I think you make a really good point there, Joe, that I think demand is a part of it, and it definitely comes into play. Chris, you've heard from both me and Joe now, and Ben, if you have any thoughts, we'll come to you after Chris.
Yeah, well, I loved hearing. I could listen to every collector on the face of this earth talk about how they make decisions like this, because it just gets me thinking about my collection. It inspires me. It causes me to think about something from a slightly new angle every single time, and I just love hearing it. And so I'm going to accentuate this discussion with a metaphor that I used in my little episode as well. And the metaphor is this, and it speaks to Joe's point in particular about demand, but I'm going to interpret demand as I'm going to break demand down into an individual psychological phenomenon. Demand being human beings wanting something, and everything that comes along with it being a human being wanting it. The irrationality of human beings, and the fact that human beings have taste, and that anyway. So the point that I want to get to, the metaphor that I had, is the metaphor of a book. So a book is conveying an idea, and the language of the book can certainly be judged by its aesthetic beauty. There are prose that are beautifully written, that are punchy, that have a syllabic symmetry that makes them enjoyable to the ear. There are ways of structuring ideas in the broader scope of the book that involves setups and payoffs and character arcs, and if it's fiction, and if it's nonfiction, building and marshaling evidence to ultimately prove a thesis. And in the idea of the book, I think really helps drive home, because a book is something that's very much just, it's a vessel for an idea, but it has to be conveyed in an aesthetically palatable way. And to the extent that the aesthetic presentation of the idea through the words, through the use of metaphor and imagery and all the different tools that language provides us, to the extent that the beauty and the aesthetic impressiveness of the prose scores high and appeals to us as human beings, that's the extent to which the idea is going to break through and actually get channeled to us. And so even with something like a book where it's very abstract and it's very much based on the idea, aesthetics still matter so much. And there's very few instances. There are some instances where a book can be poorly written or be unintelligible almost. Most of the examples are like academic books, or books about theory, scholarly works that can be just pain and drudgery to read, but we'll still do it because the idea in there is so important. But just imagine if those books were written beautifully, and then look at all the books that are written beautifully that don't maybe convey such a great idea, but because they're so beautiful, people love them and there's great demand for them and people consume them. And then I import that idea into cards, which is a card, even if it is the rarest card imaginable. Let's say that my favorite player of all time, Michael Jordan, had just one card that was ever made. So this is the only Michael Jordan card, and it has one copy. This is the most extreme, rare card imaginable. But if that card was hideous, if that card was truly disgusting and ugly, it would be really hard to imagine it having a ton of demand. The aesthetic components, whether it's in the arena of the book or the arena of the sports card or the arena of music or the arena of film, take your pick. In any of these mediums, the aesthetic beauty actually, when you think it through and when you think about, to Joe's point, the human psychology of demand, the aesthetic really, really matters, I think.
Well, I hate to tell you, Chris, but you lost half the chat there with that level of discourse. Yeah, I mean, beauty is important. I want to look at my cards and I want to enjoy it when I look at them. And owning so here's a quick hobby-related example. Back at the Sport Card Expo about 15 years ago, somebody found the printing stone for the Imperial Tobacco cards. These weren't done with printing plates. They were done with printing stones. And I was like so psyched up to get to the expo to see this thing. I brought my video camera, like one of those camcorders. I held it here and I took video of this thing. And I gotta tell you, when I saw it for the first time, I was completely disappointed with what I was like. It was literally a big hunk of like white limestone or whatever it was. It was a hunk of stone. This is an artifact. It's a hobby artifact. And it was one that if I put it on display, people would come into my office, they'd look at it and they'd say, what the heck is that? I tell them the story and they'd be like, and then they'd start looking at cards or whatever else. Cause so the beauty of a piece to me is so important to owning it. I want to enjoy looking at it. So yeah, your book analogy, to the extent that I was able to comprehend and understand what you were saying there, Chris, I think I got it. Yeah.
Your example was way better. That's the perfect example of this thing that's so rare and it's so important and it checks all these boxes on paper, and then like the aesthetic is just completely is a total turnoff. And it's like, man, this could have been, but it's just this stone. It's just awful.
Well, here, MVP Collector says, I know a guy that likes printing plates. Yeah, like I used to collect printing plates when they first came out. I thought they were unique, and I really liked the idea that, hey, these are the cards that created the cards, or the plates embedded in a card. Because at first they just took the metal, slapped it in a pack, and then they started putting nice cardboard. They framed it, they embedded it in, they made it nicer, and then they even started getting them autographed. To this day, I don't own a single printing plate. Everyone I've ever owned for my number one player I collect has been sold off because I don't enjoy looking at them. And the meaning, yeah, the meaning's cool, I guess, but I don't need it. I want the card that they were meant to make. And I own those cards. I don't own the printing plates anymore because, number one, they're just not nice to look at. Are they important? Maybe to some people, but to me, they're not. I just don't care about them. So, okay. Ben, any thoughts on any of this? Any idea of the direction you would lean? And then we're going to go to comments, guys.
First comment, I don't know if Chris is good at painting, but I think it'd be fun to listen to him describe his paintings like Bob Ross. I think that would be a good exercise for us. But no, I've always been, for me, if I translate it to like Pokemon, which I have collected for years, like I've always been more, attached, I guess, to want to collect things that are rarer and that less people have access to. And I think that industry, or I guess that hobby, is in uncharted territory right now in terms of a boom. And they've kind of been going through the same thing. There's been a huge boom in lower pop vintage Pokemon cards over the last, I would say the Pokemon boom has been going on for 6-7 months, but really the last 2 months, that's been the focus. So I think it's an interesting conversation that you compare a lot of different things as well.
All right. Thank you for chiming in, Ben. Oh, I love the insights from the new collector, because I know you're starting to really take an appreciation for this stuff that we all love. Okay, let's go to some comments here. First of all, from the last discussion, the professor says, here's my chat GPT prompt: Ted Lindsay Awards, Wayne Gretzky 5, most of any player, Mario Lemieux 4, Connor McDavid 4. So there's some more for you, Chris, just to think about. MVP Collector says rare is awesome. Dan's Vintage says rarity in vintage is a major purchase decision point because you may never see the card again, especially in a condition that is good for you. Midlife Greg says one of the reasons I love the Ernie Banks rookie card is because it's beautiful. Foul Ball says numbered cards are manufactured rarity. Pop reports mean nothing to me. Yelia Williams, shallow end collectors have the luxury of collecting skewed towards aesthetics. Midlife Greg, why am I struggling to think of an ugly vintage card? To which Dan says, Greg, Pete Rose, floating head. So I grab my Pete Rose. I love this card, you guys. I don't think it's ugly. I like it, which goes to the point that we had somewhere below here. Frankie said the problem with aesthetics is that it's completely subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Rarity, especially true rarity, is harder to come by. In the end, we collect what we like. Yeah, definitely true. Double D says, Jeremy, you nailed it in my brain when I was talking about how I look at it. Nice to hear, Dylan. Hobby Champ says, I prefer rarity aesthetics combined. Hobby Champs also says, the great thing about PCing Angel Reese is that your collection will be completely worthless in 10 years. Greg says, Hoj getting deep. A book is a vessel for an idea. My head just exploded. Foul Ball says, Hoj lost me after book. Junkwax Museum says, we continually reach new depths here on Sports Cards Live. J Max says, the printing stone looked like a stone. Oh my God. Yes. It was just there was nothing on it, but he goes to, what were you expecting from early 20th century printing technology? I was expecting to see images of the cards. I don't know. That's what I was expecting to see. There was really nothing on it. It was very strange. Bob Boozle says, collect news alert. Jeremy Lee not only hates the press, but he hates the printing plates too. Hate's a strong word, but yeah, not a huge fan of them. Dylan says, yeah, I have some absolutely beautiful printing plates. Foul Ball says, Jay Lee loves floating heads. Well, if you've been part of the Sports Cards Live community going back to the beginning, floating heads was the staple for the thumbnails going back a very long way. So yes, Foul Ball, you are right. I love the floating head for sure. I love this card, guys. I love it because it's what they were thinking back in 1963. I love the colors. You got the primary colors there. A nice image of Pete Rose. You know, his head is as big as it would be if he had the whole card anyway. So I don't know. I think it's cool. I'm a big fan. Joe, what do you think about the 63 Pete Rose?
Oh man, I mean, I've gone through different, moments with that card. I've had one for many, many years in my collection. I finally got rid of it, and now I miss it. So I have one in my future, and it's just about getting the right one.
But I also love the 64 Pete Rose. It's probably my favorite Pete Rose card is the second year. I love that. I love that card as well. So, hey, let's ask Ben, who's kind of new to this. Ben, you look at this 1963 Pete Rose card, and listen, honest, and Chris, you too. But we'll start with you, Ben. What do you think of this card?
I think it looks cool. I think the older baseball cards in particular look really cool. So I don't think it looks bad.
Chris?
Yeah, I think it looks cool too. I just wish it was only Pete Rose. Although you anticipated that point of view, and you said, well, but his head is still the same size it would be if it was a solo card. So you already came locked and loaded for that.
Listen, I much prefer rookie cards be single player. I do, but this is probably my favorite non-single player rookie card. The Nolan Ryan rookie card. I don't own one anymore. Don't love the card. Just don't love the card, So yeah, I love a lot of those second year cards though, for sure. So okay, well, anything. Okay, listen, we're ready to wrap up the show.
I was just going to say I'd take the 65 over the 64, even though it has the rookie trophy. I just like the colors and the aesthetics of the 65 a bit better. But that's what the 63 has going for it, is, like you said, those primary colors, they just pop.
Yeah, I love the 65 as well. MVP Collector calls out the Nolan Ryan. Yeah, same here, MVP. Nolan Ryan second year card is my favorite. I love the pose. I just love the 69s, the Reggie Jackson rookie year. It's weird. Like, I like a lot of the designs. There's very few designs I don't like, actually, as far as cards go, especially vintage. Modern, a lot of it like Topps, Flagship, baseball, it all looks the same to me year after year. They've made a few big differences. Prism basketball looks a lot the same to me year over year. But that might just be because, I'm not out there collecting I might feel the same way about 80s O-Pee-Chee hockey, but back in those years, I was opening packs left, right, and center, building sets, and like those designs are burned into my brain. I can look at a card and tell you the year of it, just like a lot of you guys can as well. So Ron Perry says Topps did multiplayer rookie cards for so long, it's hard to not like them. They were prominent from 62 to 1982. Foul Ball says I like the 69 Nolan Ryan better, but I can't find a raw one to complete my set. Oh, so there you go. Rarity. Foul Ball's coming up against Rarity for a card that he's willing to add to his set. So Bob Boozle can still see 91 Fleer when I close my eyes. So can I, Bob Boozle. How about, what was the yellow one? Is that the 91? The yellow, I think that's 91 Fleer. Isn't that the yellow? Those are so ugly. And the 1991 Donruss, the red. Oh, those are hideous to me. So, all right, guys, let's wrap it up. Ready to wrap up? Joe, Chris, Ben, you guys good? All right. Well, thank you to Joe. Thank you to Ben. Thank you to Chris. Thank you, of course, to Leighton Sheldon. Thank you, of course, to the hobby president, John Mangini, for joining us in the first half of the show. More so, chat, you guys were a ton of fun tonight, so thank you to all of you. I said at the top of the show that I was doing the Fanatics Collect weekly auction show tonight. I'm actually not. I had the wrong. I'm not doing it tomorrow night, but Monday is MC Monday's showcase here on the channel, and Thursday is the Fanatics Collect premiere auction with Adam Gray. It's their biggest auction ever on Fanatics Collect Premiere, over 300 items. It's going to be a ton of fun. So join us on Thursday. Join us tomorrow for the MC Mondays, which is a ton of fun show as well. Catch Joe on Midlife Cards with Greg and Double D, Dylan Double D's on that's dropping. That's going to drop tomorrow on Monday. I'm sorry, you guys haven't recorded it yet, have you?
No, it might drop on Friday.
Oh, you're recording it Monday to drop on Friday. Oh, okay. I thought I was already gearing up to watch it Monday after I did MC. So I got to wait a whole week for that.
Not everyone does lives like you.
Yeah.
Not everyone.
Love it. Well, thank you guys okay, good to know. I'd be like, where's your episode? Where's the episode, Joe? So, but catch Joe on Midlife Cards on Friday. And Chris, you're dropping some episodes on the Chris Hoge podcast, and of course, Card Ladders episode. The crossover came out last night on YouTube as well. Ben does a live stream as well on the Rolling Insights YouTube channel, so you can catch all of us in a few other places. Of course, Road to the National episode 6 is going to record on Monday and probably drop, some point next week. Surprise guest for that. He may or may not be nodding his head right now. I don't know. So we'll get to that. I'm going to read out the final comments, and then we're going to do our over thing. And Joe, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I'm good. I was pointing to the Sprite hat because it got a mention on the crossover last night. Very, very, very quick, very subtle. Probably only a few people out there heard.
The king of Sprite.
Sprite bidding, not to be confused with spite bidding, right?
Spite selling. That's right.
Sprite bidding. Oh my goodness.
Bob Boozle says, continue to watch Jeremy Lee as he guides us on the Sports Cards Live Road to the National. Please check those out. Leighton's doing the Road to the National series himself. Check his out too. Laura, thanks for another value quantity full of quality evening all. Thank you, Laura. Greg, thank you so much. Yelia, thank you. Yes, you noticed me coughing throughout tonight. MVP, appreciate you joining us here in the chat. Hobby Champs, thank you so much. Dan, of course, you've added to the hobby lexicon in a major way. Thank you, Dan's Vintage. And Double D, great to see you here in the chat, guys, here on June the 21st, 2025. Thank you, Foul Ball. On behalf of myself, Joe, Ben, Chris, Leighton, and the president, John Mangini, this episode of Sports Cards Live is now
over.
Over.
And good night, everybody.